Hello and welcome back to our coverage of the Assembly elections in Vote 03. We're all bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, well, relatively, and ready for another marathon. The headlines of this election are already well established. The DUP surging forward against the UUP, Sinn Féin eclipsing the SDLP. But today could show a different picture, as the last seats in many constituencies will be fought down to the last handful of votes. The final tally of seats for the main parties could be closer than the headlines have indicated. At any event, we have our cameras and reporters all in place to bring you the results as they happen. We're in Belfast, we're in Ballymoney, we're in Derry, in Omagh, in Banbridge, in Newtownards, in Newton Abbey and Dromore. And Mark is here with his team to make sense of this long and arduous PR system.
It certainly is long and it certainly is arduous, and in just a moment or two I'm going to ask my two guests on this side of the studio, Mark Devenport, our political editor, and Dr. Sidney Elliott from the School of Politics at Queen's, to just explain in simple layman's terms how PR works, because we did get some texts from people yesterday saying, frankly, we're baffled and we don't understand quotas, surpluses and transfers. So a little bit more about that in just a moment. But let's look at the state of the parties at this stage. We have 51 of the 108 Assembly members elected at this point, and as we fly into the chamber there through the front of Parliament buildings, this is the situation so far. 51 declared. There are the DUP members on the right hand side of the chamber with 20, 12 Ulster Unionists. We can spin around the chamber. There's the PUP with 1, that's David Irvine in East Belfast. Sinn Féin now on the other side of the chamber with 13, the SDLP with 3, and here's the surprise. One alliance, Naomi Long in East Belfast, inheriting Lord Alderdice's seat, and the big surprise there is Dr. Kieran Deaney from West Belfast, a hospital doctor who's campaigning for West Tyrone, I beg your pardon, who's campaigning for hospital services in Omagh, and he topped the poll and he beat Pat Doherty in doing so. Mark Devenport, that's the way it is at the moment, and we're not quite halfway there.
We're not quite halfway there, and basically the second day in a PR election is much more about the transfers rather than the people who've just got in with their first bundle of votes, their first preferences. So what we're going to see probably is the more centre ground parties, the Ulster Unionist and the SDLP, beginning to claw back some of the lead which DUP and Sinn Féin have racked up in the first day. But the surges on both sides seem so significant that it seems unlikely that lead will be clawed back on either side of the chamber.
OK, lots more about that in just a moment or two, and we will explain the intricacies of PR. But first, let's cross to Donna, who's got some of the headlines on the story so far.
Yes, well, I'll be here throughout the next few hours bringing you the top stories of Vote 03. Also, I want to hear what you make of the results as they come in. You can text us from your mobile phone, and you can see the number for that on your screen. It's 07786 202 200. That's 07786 202 200. Your normal text charge will apply, and don't forget to give us your name and tell us where you are from. You can also email us at politicsni@bbc.co.uk, and if you're watching on digital satellite and you want to send us a message, then press your red button and select Vote 03 messages. Back to you, Mark.
Donald, thanks very much indeed. Now we're going to just look in detail here at 3 completed constituencies. Just 3 of the 18 have elected all of their 6 MLAs. Let's just look at the overall share before we do that. Mark, talk us through this. These are important because we now have all of the first preference votes in, and the DUP will be cock-a-hoop to be top of that pile.
Absolutely. They've emerged now as the biggest party. In terms of the share of first preference votes in the last Assembly elections, it was actually the SDLP, so that's a sign of the demise there of the SDLP. The DUP clearly ahead of the UUP as well, and Sinn Féin having turned the tables there on the SDLP.
OK, now here's the change. Sidney, a word on this. It's very graphically illustrates the fact that the SDLP will not be at all happy. DUP, Sinn Féin will be happy. The Ulster Unionists are going to be not too dissatisfied that their vote has in fact increased slightly.
Their vote has gone up slightly, but in a sense the story of the election isn't that. It's DUP having turned the position round, added 7.5% to their share of the vote last time. In fact, their position now is confirmed even better than it was in the election of 2001.
And the smaller parties have been decimated.
they've gone by the board effectively.
Although they may pick up a few seats. I was talking to someone from Alliance a short time ago. They still think they could go back into the chamber with the same number of seats that they had.
That's very optimistic.
Touch and go in a few places.
Nevertheless, say they might be the only, except for the one or two individuals, that's all, not the 18 members who belong to that whole middle section previously in 1998.
Because Alliance seats are so dependent on transfers, they're often the last seats to be declared, and this is why it's very hard to give a definitive idea of the Alliance total at this stage.
OK, let's look then at West Belfast, which is the first of our completed counts, and we can see there the faces of the 6 who have come home. Starting top left, topping the poll, Gerry Adams.
Absolutely. I mean, Gerry Adams brought in 3 running mates as he did last time, but disappointment from Sinn Féin because they were trying vote management to give them a 5-1 lead over the SDLP. Instead, we got that big shot, Diane Dodds coming in, representing the Shankill. That's a real change for the Shankill that's been without representation for so long. And Alex Attwood surviving, and that was a surprise to many who thought that Joe Hendren would prove to be the SDLP's big vote getter here.
And he was the casualty.
He was the casualty. He allowed his vote to be managed, and in the end he's handed the seat over to Alex Attwood.
OK, let's look at East Belfast then. All 6 are in here, and the poll was topped by Peter Robinson, who brought home Robin Newton.
Yeah, I think he'd be a bit disappointed though that Harry Tone didn't come in. He was meant to be the third candidate there for that sweep. The Ulster Unionists actually moved a lot into Alliance territory, swept up a lot of Lord Alderdice's old vote, but Naomi Long, despite that, survived, as did David Irvine.
OK, and Newry and Armagh, the only other completed constituency at this stage. Paul Berry, fresh-faced and top of the poll?
Yes, very happy, but the big winners here are Sinn Féin, who put on an extra seat at the expense of the SDLP. We saw John Fee, the outgoing Assembly member, not holding his seat. Dominic Bradley, a new face for the SDLP. But Conor Murphy, really the winner here because he looks in pole position to inherit the Westminster seat.
OK, Sydney, I want to just look at some trends now. This is the situation within unionism over the last 10 years. The battle between the Ulster Unionists and the Democratic Unionists going back to the local government elections of 1993. And if we just move through this, and we'll move through it quite quickly, you can just talk us through the trend.
12% there, narrowing to 1996 in the Forum election. Again, when you get to the Westminster election, the gap increasing, Unionist voters voting for the Ulster Unionist Party at Westminster elections. And in 1997, in local government elections, you see the gap still a wide one, but it's after 1997 that you begin to see the narrowing of the gap between DUP and Ulster Unionists. There to 3 percentage points in 1998 in the last Assembly. And both parties actually beginning then almost in parallel but increasing their share of the vote to 2001. And then the interesting one is this election where in fact the two lines then converge and cross over in 2003.
Yeah,
and in a
just turn
sense
that around and you can see it all very clearly. There's been the crossover where the DUP now the bigger of the two unionist parties.
It is indeed, and say, well, the line is not, it's not separating very steeply, but there is a significant separation, as large as the gap between the Ulster Unionists and the Democratic Unionists in 2001. So the past 2.5 years have been very important for Democratic Unionists.
OK, Mark, you can just talk us through the equivalent graph then, which shows the history of the battle between the SDLP and Sinn Féin, starting again 10 years ago.
Back in the early 90s, before the 94 IRA ceasefire, the SDLP quite clearly dominant. The British government used to talk about Sinn Féin as Mr 10% back there when they were on 10 or 12. But here you see with the peace process, they're growing from being Mr 10%, Mr 16% there. The SDLP still getting a boost from the role that John Hume and Seamus Mallon played in all the talks leading up to the Good Friday Agreement. Local elections, a little bit of a fall, closing of the gap there. But we'll see again the SDLP doing very well in the 98 Assembly elections after the Good Friday Agreement. But here's the crossover. That's when we saw Michelle Gildernew and Pat Doherty coming in. The 2001 general election, Sinn Féin crossed over there. The local elections, a similar pattern at the same time. And Sinn Féin beginning to go away with it there as the veterans of the SDLP retire from the front line.
And really putting 7 points between the two parties.
It's a very significant gap there now, absolutely.
Okay, well, that's an interesting little exercise. It says something about the broader overall picture. We often talk a lot about the battle between unionism and nationalism, but the real fight sometimes is an intra-fight, isn't it? We'll come back to all of those figures, and we will, of course, look at individual constituency results as they come in. But just before we go back to Noel and his guests on the political panel, we did get quite a lot of text yesterday, quite a lot of phone calls. In fact, we were fairly overwhelmed with the number of people who contacted us to talk about the programme and about the election. But an awful lot of them saying, we just don't understand PR. We can't understand transfers, quotas, surpluses. 1 point, Sydney. People say, for instance, if every vote counts in PR and if every vote can be transferred, why do we talk about wasted votes whenever you look at Jeffrey Donaldson, who had such a huge personal vote? Why can't those votes simply be transferred on to other people on the ballot papers?
Well, they are transferred on. All of Jeffrey's papers would have been allocated to a second preference, provided a second preference was there. But it would have been at a reduced value. From memory, he had about 2.4 quotas. So in a sense, those papers would have been transferred on at a value less than 50%. So in a sense, this is the way it is. It's your voter choice. In effect, the only votes that are wasted will be the votes which are tied up in the end with the runners-up who won't be elected. In all, with this, about 85% or so of the votes will have an effective say in electing one of the 108 candidates. So in a sense, that is much better than, say, a simple majority, which might be as low as, well, let's say the Labour Party with 40% of the vote and gaining a huge majority where, shall we say, more than 60%, about 60% of the votes in effect are wasted in terms of electing a member of the government.
So the very simple point is, yes, the votes are transferred on.
Yes, they are.
And that does work, but they are transferred on at a reduced value.
Yes, in effect, the thing you've got to remember is that beyond stage one, these are giving effect to the choices of the voter, their preference 1, 2. They have one vote and they give that expression, and if they have added 2, 3, 4, it's a returning officer's ability then to give that choice, to follow that choice. If the first candidate doesn't need it, to give it to the next available choice as marked on that ballot paper.
And it also works the other way around, of course, from the bottom up. If you're a candidate who are eliminated, for instance, Pauline Armitage in East Londonderry got 900 odd votes. She was an MLA. She is eliminated at a certain stage in the count, and then her votes are transferred to other candidates who are still in the race, though they in fact are transferred very often at full value.
By and large, the bulk of the votes in her transfers will be at value 1. If it was very late on, her pile would have also had a number of values at less than 1, as she had got other people's surpluses. But in effect, it was early, and the bulk of those were 1. Those transferred on, from memory from yesterday, almost 50% to Ulster Unionist, 50% to Democratic Unionists. So in a sense, the value was not lost in that case. And there's just a little aside in relation to the surpluses. Surpluses arising at value at first stage will be transferred on at less than value 1. A surplus which arises later on, and this will be the bulk of them today. The papers which are considered are only the papers which took that candidate above the mark. Not all the papers in their pile, but just the last package which took them above the quota. So in a sense, it's interesting that if a surplus arose from an Ulster Unionist and went to an Ulster Unionist and helped elect them, then in a sense it's only that small packet is then transferred on to another candidate, not the whole of the papers.
Okay, it's a hugely complicated issue, and it explains perhaps why the vote is going on a little bit longer than any of us thought it was going to
It is long and it is slow, but in the end, the returning officers are giving effect to the choice which the voters have made in giving their 1, 2, 3, 4s, 5s.
Okay, well, I hope we have helped you there to understand the intricacies of PR. I hope we haven't muddied the waters even further. If you do have any direct questions that you want us to put to Sydney or to Mark, you can text us on the number that Donna mentioned, or you can email us, certainly contact us, let us know what you think, and we'll try and clarify anything that you're not absolutely sure about, and we hope to have some more results in the not too distant future. Meantime, it's back over to Noel.
It's simple, and I hope you're all paying attention, because we'll be asking you questions about PR in the course of today. Let's move on. We have, as I told you, our cameras and reporters at all the active counts. That's in Belfast, in Ballymoney, in Derry, in Omagh, in Banbridge, in Newtownards, Newtownabbey and in Dromore, and that's where all the action will be happening over the next 8 hours or so. Now we're going first of all to one of those counts, to Rosie Billingham, who's at the Fermanagh South Tyrone count. Rosie, what's the latest?
Well, we're waiting for the stage 5 results to be put up on that board, and so far we've only got one candidate elected, and that's Tom Elliott for the Ulster Unionists. But Arlene Foster, the anti-agreement Ulster Unionist, is not far behind. She's looking for just 31 votes to make that quota. In the meantime, Sinn Féin, they're doing well. Michelle Gilden, who topped the poll, didn't quite make that quota. She's also looking for 30 votes, should get in at stage 5. It was a well-balanced vote. Shared out well for Sinn Féin, but they ran a very high-risk strategy, chasing a third seat at the expense of the Ulster Unionists. The casualty of that high-risk strategy may be the outgoing MLA, Jerry McHugh. Thomas O'Reilly for Sinn Féin may get in ahead of him, so a high-risk strategy there for Sinn Féin. In the meantime, Maurice Morrow for the DUP doing well. For stage 5, though, we should see the SDLP's Tommy Gallagher getting up near the quota, if not over it, because at stage 5 we're seeing his running mates' votes shared out at this stage. So we're still looking at this. At this point, really, the general expectation is same distribution of seats here in Fermanagh South Tyrone. 2 seats for Sinn Féin, 1 for the SDLP, 2 for the Ulster Unionists and 1 for the DUP.
OK, Rosie, thank you very much indeed. We're off now to Lagan Valley, where Gareth Gordon awaits with a story from last night, Gareth.
Well, first of all, I'll deal with the electoral fight, Noel. Billy Bell, the Mayor of Lisburn, pro-agreement Ulster Unionist. His result has not been declared yet, but I'll declare him. I think he's been elected with Ivan Davis's transfers. We then have a dogfight between Nora Beer, anti-agreement Ulster Unionist, and Andrew Hunter for the DUP for an anti-agreement seat. We think also that Seamus Close, the Alliance vote-getter down here, we think he's going to be OK with Ivan Davis's transfers. Hasn't been elected yet, don't want to call it, but I think he's OK. And then there's a fight for the nationalist seat between Patricia Loosley, Paul Butler. Very tight, but it looks like Patricia Loosley is winning that fight. Now I have with me Paul Butler, the Sinn Féin candidate. Paul Butler, electoral fights are one thing, but you've had other problems here at the count at Dromore.
Yes, well last night what we had what known to be described as a loyalist mob made their way into Dromore Leisure Centre and actually got in on the count, started threatening people, pointing at people like myself and other Sinn Féin members. Now we left the building, other police come on the scene. But then we were attacked in the car park, and this loyalist mob was allowed to get round my car, shout sectarian abuse, try and stop the car and getting out of the car park. So
you're obviously back here this morning. I mean, have you concerns about you've got a day to spend here, you and other Sinn Féin members? Have you any concerns about security here?
We've big concerns. I mean, what happened last night could have turned out much worse. There was no protection at all. The police weren't doing anything to stop this mob shouting abuse on it, and things could have went very, very wrong, and somebody could have been seriously hurt there. Now, I'm going to be taking this up with the electoral office. We're going to be complaining to Dennis Stanley that this is interference in the democratic process. If this happened somewhere else in the world, the British government would be out in a hue and cry about it.
The police are here at the count. Have you raised the situation with them? Have you made a complaint to the police?
Well, we're not making it to the police. We're going to raise that to the police ombudsman.
But have you spoken to the police at the scene?
No, we haven't, no. We do that through the electoral office. It's up to the electoral office to ensure that this election is carried out fairly, that the democratic process is upheld, and that candidates can come here and feel safe and take part in the count. Now, I couldn't do that last night. When this loyalist mob got into the count, they were threatening. So I was distracted. I felt really under threat, and nobody was doing anything about it. We actually had to go to the electoral office people and tell them there's loyalists. You could see the way they were dressed in the actual count, shouting abuse at us.
We are known as problems here, and not just of an electoral nature for Paul Butler.
OK, Gareth, thank you very much indeed for that. Well, I have some guests in studio with me, as always. To start at the far end of my desk, Davey Adams, who was a UDP politician before that party dissolved, Stephen Farry of the Alliance Party, Seamus Mallon, formerly SDLP Deputy Leader, of course, and Sinclair McAllister, who's a former Director of Communications for the I beg your pardon, for the DUP. It's very early in the morning, Sinclair, won't make that mistake again. OK, let's start with Davey Adams. Davey Adams, the centre ground, the smaller parties, there were 18 in the 1998 Assembly, there might be half a dozen in this one. Yeah. You know what that is like. What is it like?
Oh, I know it only too well. It's soul destroying, to be honest with you, to be beaten in any election. I think one of the stories of this election, aside from how well the DUP have done, has been the fact that it's beginning to develop into a situation where it seems that independence on small parties need not apply. I think as well as that, what strikes me very much about it is the vote management that has taken place, particularly on Sinn Féin's side, and we shouldn't be surprised at that, for that has happened over previous elections, but also the DUP have very much managed their vote. I think in Strangford was a prime example of that, where Iris Robinson brought in her 2 running mates very easily. And I think contrast that with, for example, Jeffrey Donaldson's situation in Lagan Valley, where a vote, and I live in the Lagan Valley constituency, and as far as I'm aware, there was no effort made there to manage the vote. But if it had been managed properly, Jeffrey and his 2 anti-agreement running mates would have sailed in. So I think, amongst a lot of other things, the Ulster Unionist Party and others have to start to be far more disciplined in terms of managing their vote.
But for small parties, I mean, getting the vote out requires huge organisation. It requires huge numbers of people to knock on doors for weeks before an election. Clearly, small parties don't have those resources, human or financial.
No, that's true, but I think as well as that, with the situation being as it is in the bigger political picture, an awful lot of people would have come out and decided to cast their vote in terms of whether it was SDLP or Sinn Féin they preferred on the bigger nationalist front, or UUP and DUP on the larger unionist front. And in that situation, there is going to be a squeeze on smaller parties. I mean, the Alliance Party, for example, I imagine a lot of previous Alliance voters have voted Ulster Unionist in terms of trying to give David Trimble a boost. So that is going to happen. And I think the system and the party registration and all the rest of it, I think tends to push independence to the side anyway, and smaller parties. I think it tends to squeeze them, the system. And the situation we had recently, with the political situation, I think exacerbated all of that.
All right. Stephen Farry, would you concur with Davey Adams' assessment of the alliance?
Yeah, well, I think the agreement has institutionalised a process where it's the stronger voice within each of the blocks that stands to benefit. It's institutionalised that inter-ethnic competition to the detriment of the political centre. And there's a very serious question as to whether the political process can work without a strong centre.
Do you think that's a function of fear?
It's very much a function of fear. I think the way I express it, people have voted to avoid their worst fear, or to try to avoid their worst fear, rather than to realise their best hope. And as a consequence, I think Northern Ireland has taken a step backwards. As for the Alliance Party, I think we are in a situation where we will survive this election. Clearly the vote is down across Northern Ireland. We have targeted a number of seats very strongly, and we think we will certainly have 4 of our 6 seats, and our 2 seats in Strangford and South Antrim, where we're going to have very, very tight contests that are going to go right to the wire. But it is conceivable that we will come back, albeit on a reduced vote, but retaining our 6 current seats.
But for the Alliance Party, it's been a continuing story of decline, hasn't it?
Yes, that's undeniable. But I think it's part of a wider trend within Northern Ireland to the extremes that's not actually going to work for Northern Ireland. And there will be a bounce back to the centre, because politics here cannot work without a strong centre. And we're going to find that out over the next few months.
Seamus, is that your analysis?
Yeah, well, could I say, I'm very disturbed actually that at the loss of the smaller parties. And I mean that sincerely, because the agreement should have opened up a political pluralism in Northern Ireland, which would have been new, which would have brought a new dimension to the whole process.
Yeah. Sorry,
instead we have got.
Conversely, we have this election of the candidate, the single-issue hospital candidate, Dr. Dean. That's like a first for Northern Ireland. So that kind of bucks that trend, doesn't it?
Well, if you had heard me out, you'd have heard what I was going to say.
Keep it going.
On the one hand, you have got political pluralism that we all want to see. Now we have got in the north of Ireland, we have got a political fundamentalism in terms of both the vote for Sinn Féin and for the DUP. Now we have to ask the reasons why. And I think one of the reasons why is we're coming out of a period of extended violence. You have got a generational factor within young people who don't know and haven't themselves experienced the awfulness of those periods of violence. And they haven't seen the benefits of real politics. Having said that, we have got to accept the results that the electorate have given us. That's what they are, and we have got to deal with them. And we have got to deal with them in a way that we start somehow or another within the political process to get some type of generosity into it. And the thing that has blighted the past 5 years in politics in the north of Ireland more than anything else has been the lack of generosity, especially the lack of generosity, I have to say, shown by the Republican movement in relation to what was needed by unionism, that was dealing with the arms issue. And that's why the Sinn Féin have increased their vote, because they have appealed to that fundamentalism, but in the process they might well have half strangled the political process as they were doing it.
Yeah, Sinclair McAllister, I mean, we've heard it today, we hear it often, we read it in the papers, it's talk of a return to fundamentalism, to extremism. Do you recognise yourself and the party which you used to direct communications for in that?
Well, I do not agree with that term, extremism. And when you listen to the smaller parties, democracy is great in the sense that anyone can stand. Noel, you could go out tomorrow, and that's the great thing about democracy, you could stand. Now, in reality, politics is about power. People want value for money in the vote that they cast, just like they want value for money in anything else in life. And it's about delivery. And it's quite obvious on the unionist side, they've looked at what David Trimble has been unable to deliver, and they now are putting their faith in a unionist that will deliver. And similarly on Sinn Féin's side, Sinn Féin have made the gains because not only in this election, but like the DUP, they've done the day in, day out work on the ground, helping people.
But again,
and
so that power is assisted by a powerful machine which requires a lot of money and a lot of people. Small parties don't have it.
Yes, it does. But at the end of the day, as I said yesterday, it's quite obvious that people in the DUP and people in Sinn Féin are passionate about their politics. They're passionate about what they believe in. And that is quite evident here. And people are looking for value in where they're voting. And Seamus is quite right. You cannot ride over the votes of the people. The people are making their statement on this. They're making it quite clear. Smaller parties, it's great that they can stand, but I think their day is over because they can't really deliver. Plus, we have a problem that some of these smaller parties are chameleon-like, and that does not go well.
All right, thank you for that for the moment. Let's get an up-sum in the day so far with Donna.
Thanks, Noel. The future of devolved government is expected to be discussed when Tony Blair and Bertie Ahern meet in Cardiff this morning. They're attending a meeting of the British-Irish Council, which was established under the Good Friday Agreement. Neither the Prime Minister nor the Taoiseach would respond to questions put to them by reporters about the election results. Now to your thoughts on the election so far. Mervyn Adair in Limavady was an early bird at 2 o'clock this morning. Thank you for your message. He says the DUP will be the first and only party to have a seat in every one of the 18 constituencies. At last, a victory for true and honest unionism. Paul from Belfast says Sinn Féin are the biggest nationalist party and must be given respect now. Derek in Mollusk says it's great to see the DUP back in business again. Kenny from Lagan Valley says, are the government not concerned that loyalists might only have one representative? What will the UDA do without a seat? Chris from Portadown says Davey Adams talks about equality and an agreement for everyone, yet he addresses the public in Gaelic. Politics is all hypocrisy, he says. Gerard from West Belfast says if the SDLP slogan in West Belfast was vote for us to stop the DUP, then why did 3.6% of their vote transfer to Diane Dodds of the DUP? Mark from Rathcoole says if the Ulster Unionist Party is the future and the DUP the past, then the past has come back to haunt them. Thank you for your messages. Keep them coming in. I'll be back later. Noel.
Donna, thank you. Straight to the Fermanagh South Tyrone constituency where Arlene Foster, the Ulster Unionist sceptic, has just been elected. Arlene Foster, congratulations to you. Arlene Foster, congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Now, that's 2 Ulster Unionists in the constituency so far, so that's no change there. But in the wider picture, are you disappointed at your party's performance?
Well, you may say there's no change in Fermanagh and South Tyrone, but we're absolutely delighted here because in 1998 we had to wait to the very last to get somebody in under the quota. So this time we've came forward and the Unionist vote is up, and we're absolutely delighted for Fermanagh and South Tyrone that that's the case.
OK, so let's look at the wider picture. Oh, we've just lost Arlene Foster. Let's just wait a few seconds to see if she'll return. No. OK, well, we can go to East Londonderry where Maggie Taggart awaits. Maggie.
Yes, Noel, and although they're still counting here in East Londonderry, I think we can fairly well predict what the result is going to be. It will be 2 DUP seats. They had hoped for 3, but it's likely to be 2. 2 Ulster Unionists, 1 Sinn Féin and 1 SDLP. They used to have 2. They're now redistributing the votes of Maurice Bradley of the DUP, but it's almost certain that George Robinson of the DUP will soon reach the quota, and that 4th Unionist seat will go to the Ulster Unionist, to Norman Hillis. The last to be elected will probably be John Dallitt of the SDLP, without his running mate, who is Michael Coyle, a casualty of a strong Sinn Féin vote. John Dallitt, you must be a bit disappointed, even though you will be elected probably.
Well, yes, I will be elected. I'm disappointed, of course. Michael Coyle was a splendid candidate. He had a short term in the last assembly, replacing Arthur Doherty. We worked as a team. Both candidates have remained in the battle until the end, and that, of course, is a feature of PR.
And you lost out to the nationalist vote going to Sinn Féin?
Yes, well, we lost out really to the 4 in the 10 of the population who didn't come out to vote. In 1998 we relied very heavily on transfers from the Lions Party. The Lions vote collapsed this time, so we had no transfers coming to us.
What do you think about the DUP not getting the 3 they had hoped to, but doubling the number of representatives here?
Well, of course, this election was attractive to parties at the extremes. And I hope that that's a short-term thing, and I hope when the new SDLP team meets next week that common sense will prevail, and perhaps the next time the electorate will have something positive to attract that 4 in 10 of the population who didn't come out.
So we hope that this will be wrapped up around lunchtime. We should have the final and full vote. Back to the studio.
Thank you very much indeed, Maggie. Tara Mills is in Mid-Ulster for us. Tara, what's the story with you?
Well, Noel, just within the last few minutes, Sinn Féin has just taken a 3rd seat here in Mid-Ulster. That's newcomer Geraldine Duggan replacing the outgoing MLA John Kelly. Now, that's still the same number of seats Sinn Féin has here in this constituency. Just to give you an overall picture of what else is happening here, William McCrea and Martin McGuinness obviously elected on the first count, and just before counting ended last night, then Francie Malloy from Sinn Féin was elected, and his transfers obviously have gone on then to Geraldine Duggan to get her elected now. So the only surprise here likely to come is a change in personnel rather than party. The SDLP are likely to hold their seat, but it looks as if Patsy McGlone, former chair of Cookstown District Council, is going to actually unseat the outgoing MLA Dennis Haughey, who was a former junior minister in the executive, so a bit of a surprise there. On the Unionist side, Ulster Unionists likely to retain their seat, with the outgoing MLA Billy Armstrong likely to take the 6th seat here.
OK, Tara, thank you very much indeed. Now let's go back to Arlene Foster in Fermanagh South. Apologies for that interruption. The vagaries of our technology defeated us for a moment. But anyway, you're back now. I was asking you about the wider picture in Ulster Unionism. I mean, clearly your vote is marginally up, but a very disappointing performance for the party as a whole against the DUP.
Well, what I wanted to emphasise to you, Noel, and to your listeners, is that a lot of people had written off Fermanagh and South Tyrone after the Westminster election, and clearly that's not the case. We're very strong here, and I believe that we will contest the Westminster election when it comes along very vigorously. And that, of course, from a psychological point of view, for Unionists living in the west of the province, is very, very important.
OK, so let me get you to address that wider question, though, now. I mean, are you pleased at the success of the DUP? Do you think it's an endorsement of the Ulster Unionist sceptics' position?
Well, I'm not here to comment on the DUP's position. I'm here to comment on my own position. I'm delighted with my vote. I think it's an endorsement of my position over this past 5 years. I have been clearly very sceptical about the implementation of the agreement, and that has been endorsed by the electorate.
All right. I'm going to ask you this again, though, because it is an important question. I mean, the mini manifesto spoke about, which you and the other sceptics brought out, talked about much closer cooperation with other unionists, i.e. the Democratic Unionists. And so it is, in a way, an endorsement of that wider unionist anti-agreement position.
Well, I think clearly what we were hearing on the doorsteps was that people wanted closer cooperation between unionism. They're fed up with the fighting. They want to see us working together. And I hope certainly that that's what happened in the new Assembly. And I certainly look forward to that as a challenge.
Jeffrey Donaldson said last night that he considered David Trimble's position to be, or would be, untenable if the Ulster Unionists turned out to be the second largest unionist party. That still seems likely to happen. Would you agree with that position, that David Trimble should go?
I think to put it in context, what he was saying is if we came in behind Sinn Féin, that his position would be untenable. I certainly think that he needs to look very clearly at his leadership of the party over this past 5 years, and most particularly over this last couple of months, and hopefully that will be done very soon.
So he should go?
Well, what I'm saying to you is if we come in behind Sinn Féin, that obviously needs to... somebody has to take the blame for that, and clearly I believe it's the leadership.
And how soon should that happen?
Well, I'm not going to tell somebody when they have to make a decision about their own political future, but I believe it should happen very soon because of the stability of the situation.
Arlene Foster, thank you very much
Thank
indeed.
you.
We're going to cut to some live pictures of David Trimble arriving at his count centre in Upper Bann. Obviously that count is still going on. David Simpson, the DUP, and David Trimble both elected in that constituency. So let's just hear what he's got to say.
Said this morning that apparently your position as leader would be untenable if the DUP emerges as the largest unionist party. Your reaction to that?
I think it's rather unfortunate for Jeffrey to be so eager for the defeat of his party. And he's also premature. We will wait to see what the position is at the end of the day. And we will find at the end of the day, not only has the Ulster Unionist vote held up, and indeed in first preference terms increased its percentage share, but you will see as the count rolls through that we will end up with between 26 and 28 seats, and have every expectation actually it'll be at the higher end of that range. And I think that's a different ball game entirely.
Do you still think you'll be the largest unionist party? Will you still be the leader of the Ulster Unionist Party?
I have every intention of continuing as leader. I know that there is an important job to be done, and I have demonstrated clearly over the last 8 years that there's more than a little stickability here.
Do you still think you'll be the largest unionist party?
Well, there we have it. David Trimble saying that Jeffrey Donaldson is being too eager, and that story will evolve in the course of the day, of course. Let's go now to Balmoral, the count centre for North and South Belfast, and Jim Fitzpatrick is there.
Noel, things are starting to move here again. In North Belfast, I think we're just minutes away from having Fred Cobain of the Ulster Unionists elected. That will be on the elimination of Fraser Agnew, who was formerly a party member and has since been an anti-agreement unionist. So some irony there that he will help elect the pro-agreement Fred Cobain. Also then in South Belfast, the Alliance distribution of Geraldine Rice's votes is unlikely to help Monica McWilliams. So I think shortly we'll probably be able to say that Monica McWilliams will not be staying in this race.
Okay, Jim, what's the mood there at Balmoral today? It was busy yesterday.
Certainly was. The mood today, it's somewhat settled. People seem to know what the results are going to be. In the Women's Coalition camp, for instance, it's a very sad day. Monica Williams herself is not here. She may make an appearance later on, but she knows pretty much what the outcome is going to be. One of her own people put the odds at the moment of about 1,000 to 1 of her staying in this race. The SDLP are somewhat more buoyed in South Belfast because it looks like they're going to retain their 2 seats there. And elsewhere, the mood, I suppose, Ulster Unionist Fred Cobain, he was here earlier. He surveyed the scene like a military commander who knew he was victorious, and there are bodies on the battlefield. Principally in North Belfast, we're going to see Billy Hutchinson no longer sitting in the Assembly.
Okay, Jim, thank you very much indeed. Let's return to my studio guest now. Davey Adams, I mean, your party has hit the skids. David Irvine is in, but Billy Hutchinson is out. What are the implications of that for loyalism?
Well, I don't know. I can only guess, the same as everyone else. I certainly would like to have seen Billy retain his seat, and I'm delighted that Davey Irvine has held on to his. I think it probably, to state the obvious, it would have had far bigger implications if David had failed to hold his seat as well. But as I say, I mean, in the sort of contest and this political situation that we have had, independents and smaller parties were always going to be squeezed because people wanted to cast their vote in terms of Sinn Féin or SDLP or DUP Ulster Unionist.
But you know that there is a theory that the continuing violence on the loyalist side is a result of the fact that they don't have a political expression. Clearly for the UDA, the demise of your party got rid of that voice, and there's been a lot of violence within the UDA. With the demise of part of the PUP, you're not a spokesman for the other side, for the UVF, but do you fear that there could be greater unrest there?
Well, I'm not a spokesman for any side now.
No, I appreciate that.
You know, I'm completely out of party politics altogether. But I would have a concern, certainly, but I think it's far, far too simplistic for people to imagine that just because people have a so-called political voice or an elected representative or two that somehow that will cure all ills. I don't think it will. I think we are quite obviously going through the period of conflict resolution that has been experienced by all other situations, and it will take a time for all of the violence to disappear. There's no doubt about that. And I think whilst political representation does have some positive impact on that, I certainly don't see it as a panacea.
Okay, let's just go and speak to a new victorious candidate. Stephen, you'll be pleased to hear it's Eileen Bell in North Down, and Stephen Walker is with Eileen.
Hello, Noel. Well, Eileen Bell hasn't been elected yet. No one in North Down has been elected, but some transfers have put Eileen Bell in a better position than she was last night. The top 6 in North Down are still Unionist, 3 Ulster Unionists, 2 DUP and 1 UKU, that's Bob McCartney. But Eileen Bell has now closed the gap between herself and Diane Peacock, and the 6th candidate there, the 6th seat. So Eileen Bell, you're hopeful of taking a seat here?
Very hopeful. I have been told that the last of the transfers, but perhaps with the exception of Chambers, that I will be the benefactor of most of those, a good percentage of them. So I am hopeful that I will be the only non-unionist pro-agreement candidate, a newly elected member, returned member.
And that's the only outcome there's going to be in North Down, 5 Unionists and 1 alliance.
Yes, it's quite funny. I think the general feeling last night, at the end of last night and this morning, is that I might be the only candidate with the transfers that I'll get at the end of it to actually reach the quota and to be first. So that would be a nice thing for me to happen. But as long as I get in, say, 4th or 5th, I'd be happy enough. I don't want to let the people of North Down down, because I think they may not be as well serviced by what is happening at the moment as people might think.
But what's happened in North Down has been replicated right across Northern Ireland. Your vote has been squeezed.
Absolutely.
You've been a victim here.
We knew this was going to happen. But as you can see, people like myself who have a long record of work, etc., will get in. I mean, even if I didn't get in with first past the post or anything, the way the transfers are going, it represents the true diversity of people in North Down and in Northern Ireland. And yes, I think, Stephen, we have to acknowledge now that Northern Ireland, it will be a divided society, a two-nation society now. So the Alliance Party will have to look at that and see how they can deal with that. And it is a change. But I actually have always been a believer in democracy, and I would like to think that the 2 larger parties, the DUP and the Sinn Féin and the others, now that they've been comfortable in their mandates, they will now start thinking about the people and stop thinking about their party's aims. And I hope that can only be good for the people of Northern Ireland. The governments will have to look at it. They've been trying to get away from it. In May, they tried to get away from it. That's this sort of result. I knew this result was going to happen.
And if your party leader, David Ford, doesn't get in, you could find yourself party leader at Stormont?
I certainly could find myself acting party leader. Obviously, it has to be a decision by the Assembly group, what would be left of us, and the party as well.
Are you resigned to losing seats across Northern Ireland?
We have had to be resigned to it. Our target seats are holding up quite well at the moment, but I mean, there's a possibility that David was talking to him this morning, and I think he is more or less resigned that he will be losing a seat. Sean Neeson is not sure what he's going to get, what way is happening. I think Seamus is safe. Terrific result in East Belfast. Naomi Long is in. Naomi will be a wonderful addition to the team. She's a new person, a young person, and I think will be very good for us, not least because she's a very good woman.
Okay. Eileen Bell, thank you very much. Well, that's the position here at North Down. We should have some people elected, hopefully by lunchtime.
Stephen, it was one of those funny quirks of the PR system, cheerio Eileen, one of those funny quirks of the system that there was a possibility that 6 people would be elected in North Down without a single one of them reaching the quota.
That's absolutely right. I mean, the quota, as you can see, is 4,400, and some candidates are obviously on 3,000. Maybe there's not enough, for example, unionist votes to help candidates, perhaps like Bob McCartney, like Alan McFarlane, perhaps like Peter Ware. And it could be that centre ground at the moment, which is being counted at the moment, people like Brian Wilson, the community candidate, people like the Green candidate, even if it comes to somebody like Jane Morris, if she is knocked out, her votes could end up going to somebody like Eileen Bell, and she could end up being the only candidate who reaches the quota.
OK, Stephen, thank you very much indeed. We're going straight down to Fermanagh in South Tyrone now, where we're joined by two more successful candidates, Michelle Gildernew, who's of course the Sinn Féin MP for the area, and Tommy Gallagher of the SDLP. Congratulations to you both. Michelle Gildernew, first of all, we're hearing calls from Seamus Mallon in our studio here for generosity from parties in this new political dispensation, new political landscape. What have Sinn Féin to offer in terms of generosity?
Well, Noel, I think first of all it's been a very good election for Sinn Féin, and we've found that we weren't relying on our canvass. The people were very much determined to get out and vote this time and to vote for Sinn Féin, for the party that is bringing about real change.
Well, so I'm sorry to interrupt you. We heard that it was your canvass that did bring them out. You were calling at people's houses 3 or 4 times in the course of the campaign. It was a very disciplined election.
I'm having difficulty hearing you, Noel. Just could you repeat that, please?
OK, I'm saying that you're saying that it wasn't your canvass that got people out. We've heard to the contrary all week, that it was your extremely disciplined canvassing, calling with people 3 or 4 times in the course of the election, that got you your votes.
Well, we always do that. We weren't taking any votes for granted. What I'm saying is we didn't have to convince people on the doorsteps, that they had already made up their mind that they were going to vote and who they were going to vote for. Obviously, we provide a very excellent service on the day to ensure that people with transportation difficulties can get to the poll. We don't take anybody's vote for granted, but we're delighted that our vote has increased across the board. It's a huge increase in our vote, huge increase in the number of seats, and very good day for Sinn Féin. OK, let me ask you again about the generosity. What are you prepared to show in this new dispensation? What new things can you bring to this process? Well, we can bring with us the same drive and determination and commitment that we've always shown in this process. We have said right along that we'll negotiate with anybody. We will talk to anyone to bring about a new political dispensation on this island, and that's what it's about. I mean, we've always looked to the future, to United Ireland. We believe that our result yesterday and today is a very clear mandate that people like what Sinn Féin are doing, like the way we're delivering on the ground, and do believe that a United Ireland is the way to go.
Do you think the IRA will show some generosity?
Sorry, Noel, I'm really
okay.
having difficulty hearing.
Do you think the IRA will show some generosity?
I think the IRA have shown a tremendous amount of generosity, a tremendous amount of discipline over the past 9 or 10 years and before. And I think certainly the difficulties in the political process today are not down to the IRA and not down to Sinn Féin. OK, thank you for that, Michelle Gildernew. Tommy Gallagher, congratulations to you. Now, you're one of the well-known figures who's been successful. A lot of people like Dennis Hockey have fallen by the board. So, a sad election for the SDLP.
Well, I want to say first of all that we've retained our seat in this constituency, and I'm encouraged and heartened by the very strong support that there still is there amongst the electorate for the policies and for the principles of the SDLP. You're quite right, there are difficulties there. There's no denying that, and that's something that we have to start to address quite soon after this election, and I know that we will be doing that.
What do you mean when you say address it? Do you mean complete party reorganisation? Do you think you can come back from this setback?
Well, this is politics, of course. We can come back from this setback. We have to sit down, review the situation and come up with new plans. And I'm confident we can do that and that they will take us out of these difficulties. We, after all, are the architects of the Good Friday Agreement. We are the people who are trying in our way to build a new and agreed Ireland, and we still have a very important and constructive role to play in that, and we want to get on with the work when the election is over, and we'll have a very clear picture at the end of today.
You've not had much thanks for your architectural plans, have you, though?
Well, it's as I've said, we've had very strong support in this constituency here, and I know in other constituencies from what I'm picking up in the media. We're encouraged by that. There is a very solid core of people there who support our principles and our beliefs, and we're going to build on that.
Thank you very much, Tommy Gallagher. Let's go straight to Antrim North, and Shane Glynn has someone with him there. Shane.
Thanks, Noel. Well, the DUP did it yesterday, taking a seat in Sinn Féin's West Belfast stronghold, and this morning we expect Sinn Féin to do the same and take a seat here in DUP country in North Antrim. Now, yesterday, Philip McGuigan, the Sinn Féin candidate, missed out on being elected on his first preference votes by just around 100 votes, and this morning the action will centre, if you like, on the transfer of SDLP votes, when Declan O'Loan will be eliminated within the next few hours, and Sinn Féin are confident that they'll get the 100 or so votes to elect Philip McGuigan, who is with me now. Philip, if you do take this seat, it will be at the expense of a UUP MLA. Obviously, Unionist voters didn't vote for you, so what did happen here to potentially allow you to take this seat?
Well, we have been arguing over this last number of weeks that there were 2 nationalist quotas in North Antrim. If you look at the figures, you'll see that the swing from the SDLP to Sinn Féin has been 5%. So I think you'll find the answer in there, in that while we have attracted younger voters, new voters, we have also attracted people who have traditionally voted for the SDLP.
And what does this say to the SDLP, do you think?
Well, what it says to the SDLP is that the direction that the leadership of Sinn Féin are taking is the right road. People, particularly in areas like this, want their elected representatives to stand up to unionism. This North Antrim constituency is regarded as Ian Paisley's heartland, which it is, but what the message the Nationalist and Republican people have sent out is that they want somebody who will be prepared to stand up and be more radical in an approach towards Ian Paisley.
You mentioned that this is Ian Paisley's heartland. Is the election of a Sinn Féin candidate a real psychological blow, if you like, for the party?
Yeah, well, I mean, when we were on the doorsteps, we told people to come out and play their part in making history in North Antrim. You know, they have bought into the argument and they have delivered. It is an historic election. It also sets the platform for future council elections. Looking at the figures, Sinn Féin and North Antrim are going to be taking more councillors in Ballymoney and Moyle and making the breakthrough in Ballymena.
Okay, Philip, thanks very much.
Thank you.
Noel, we expect the 6th candidate to be returned to be Sean Farron of the SDLP. He may be returned without reaching the quota. We expect the final results to be known by mid to late afternoon.
Shane, thank you very much indeed. Well, lots of more results have been coming in. Let's go to Mark and see how it all fits into the big picture.
OK, Noel, thank you very much indeed. We're going to go back to Fermanagh, South Tyrone. Noel was speaking to Michelle Gildernew and Tommy Gallagher just a few moments ago, and we've got some figures to show you from Fermanagh, South Tyrone. Mark, just talk us through this. We look at the top. There are 12 candidates, so here are the top 8.
Yeah, Michelle Gildernew, the local MP, top in the poll, and Tom Elliott also came in there top for the Ulster Unionist, and we've just seen Tommy Gallagher. If we come down to the others.
We'll just come down and look at the bottom 4 here.
Yeah, well, we've got Robert Mulligan, the third UUP, never much of a chance here.
The Women's Coalition and Alliance, again, they'll be disappointed,
exactly,
won't they? OK, we'll go back to the top then, and we will elect those who actually move through here. None of them on the quota at that stage, so there was obviously elimination and redistribution. You can see the numbers shifting here as this is the complicated part of PR, which we're showing people how the numbers
Michelle
jumble about.
Got more first preferences. Tom Elliott then
was the
came
first
through,
person
was the first to be elected.
Yeah. His surplus then is redistributed.
Exactly, helping out Arlene Foster there. Tommy Gallagher came in.
And this is all because of eliminations at the bottom of the pile, which we're not seeing there, but you can see at that point the numbers shuffled and we in fact had 3 returned.
Yeah, and what we're going to see really is the same again position here. We're going to have 2 Sinn Féin with, I think, well, it looks like maybe a change of a candidate potentially. Jerry McHugh was the outgoing Assembly member, so maybe the third Sinn Féin candidate will actually inherit the seat from me, or inherit his seat, and then we'll see Maurice Morrow coming through, clearly a DUP seat. So possibly a change of personalities, and certainly a big change of personalities on the Ulster Unionist side, because there were 2 staunchly pro-agreement Unionists here, Sam Foster and Joan Carson, and instead we've got Arlene Foster there and Tom Elliott, who, although he's been fairly associated with David Trimble during this campaign,
he's a bit equivocal,
a little bit more on the fence, really.
Okay, right. Well, that's the situation in Fermanagh South Tyrone. 4 elected and 2 still to go, and so they are still counting in Fermanagh South Tyrone. As soon as we hear who the other 2 MLAs are, we will of course let you know. Here are the members returned for South Antrim.
Yes, well, here we have the DUP doing the mopping up operation that we've been talking about. Norman Boyd, who was a Northern Ireland Unionist, and before that a UK Unionist, he's gone, and in his place we've got Paul Girvan and Wilson Clyde. David Burnside polling strongly. We would expect Jim Wilson to come through on the pro-agreement side of unionism. Then we've also got this 6-seat battle that we're watching closely, with David Ford wondering whether he can clamber up on the benefit of transfers and take that 6th seat, or whether Martin Meehan will hold on till the end.
I mean, it's interesting there because Jim Wilson topped the poll last time round, pro-agreement, very staunch supporter of David Trimble, and the first 3 in this time round are staunchly anti-agreement.
Exactly, yeah. One other interesting possible change of personality here could be that there is an SDLP seat, but at the moment Donovan McClellan, the outgoing Assembly member, is trailing his running mate Thomas Burns, so we could see a change of personality there.
Okay. Now, the situation in mid-Ulster. These are the MLAs returned. A couple of big hitters there who came in 1 and 2.
Indeed, Willie McRae topped the poll, but Martin McGuinness remains in pole position to retain his seat, as everybody expected, and he's divided his votes in order to get in Francie Malloy and Geraldine Dugan. As we were hearing from Mid-Ulster, a change of personality potentially with the SDLP's Dennis Hockey being supplanted by his running mate Patsy McGlone. And then the final seat here going to Billy Armstrong, the outgoing Ulster Unionist Assembly member.
And Dennis Hockey will be deeply disappointed because, of course, he has done very well in the past, and he was a junior member of the government.
He was a junior minister within the office of the First and Deputy First Minister. At the same time, he's always had this problem that there have been 2 strong local candidates there, with Patsy McGlone always with a very strong local profile.
Okay, we've got a little sequence here just to show you some of the best performances and some of the weakest performances for some of the parties here. The story so far, Sydney, has been very much Sinn Féin doing well at the expense of the SDLP. These are the 3 best performances for the SDLP, and they're not hugely encouraging for the party.
No, we'll say they're just under 2% in East Antrim, and that effectively was the work of Danny O'Connor. And there's still a question mark over whether he might be re-elected.
Yeah, despite his improved performance, I don't think he'll survive there.
And South Belfast is traditionally a very strong area for SDLP, but they have found competition from Sinn Féin this time.
We'll look at some of the other parties in a moment or two, but here are the worst performances.
I mean, and in some of these places, obviously, you're looking at lost seats. For instance, in Newry and Armagh, they're a lost seat. The West Tyrone, where they've lost the seat to the hospital campaigner. Foyle, it looks like they will maintain their position, which shows how strong they are, that they can take an 11% swing against them in Foyle, their heartland, and still hang on.
Okay, we'll look at the best and weakest performances of Sinn Féin, the Ulster Unionists and the DUP in a moment or two, but let's go straight over to Noel.
Thank you very much indeed, Mark. Let's go to East Antrim for, to South Antrim for an update from Julian ONeill. Julian.
Good morning. Well, as Mark was saying there, the DUP have already had cause to celebrate in this constituency here this morning with the election of the Newton Abbey Mayor Paul Girvan. But looking further down the line to possibly 5 o'clock and the 11th count, things are shaping up for a very, very tight finish indeed between the Alliance leader David Ford and the Republican veteran Sinn Féin candidate Martin Meehan. Now, Martin Meehan holds a 500 vote lead over David Ford at the moment, but Mr Ford is predicting that as little as 200 votes could separate them at 5 o'clock on the 11th count, and he can't call it either way at this stage. This 6th seat is going to come down to transfers. Will David Ford pull in enough Unionist transfers, and will Martin Meehan pull in enough SDLP transfers? That's the golden question at the moment, and whoever wins that battle will take the 6th seat. There are, of course, 2 constituencies being fought here. East Antrim is the other one. The DUP feel they're poised for 3 seats, so 1, 2, 3 in this constituency. But again, the 6th seat here will prove possibly the most interesting. Danny O'Connor looks vulnerable and isn't hopeful. When I last spoke to him last night, he felt that he needed at least 3,000 first preference votes to stand a chance of holding his seat, and he polled well short of that. So things will get very interesting here, but it'll be late on in the day, Noel.
Is there much excitement in Newton Abbey, Julian, or is it pretty flat today?
Well, it was a very late night last night. The reporters, the counters, the candidates all left here very, very weary indeed. It was a case of last man out, throw off the lights. We're all gathered here this morning. I haven't seen too many candidates around so far, so that perhaps gives us an indication we could be in for a late finish. I think the reason they counted so late onto the night to 10, 10:30 last night, was to avoid overrunning into Saturday, and no one here wants that. So things will probably, we'll know for sure around tea time, possibly 5, 6 o'clock. Everyone's hoping here that both counts will be finished.
OK, Julian, thank you very much indeed. Now, we've heard about the new DUP dynasty, Nigel and Diane Dodds. There was, of course, another one before that, Iris Robinson in Strangford, Peter Robinson in East Belfast. Let's go to Strangford now. Stephen Walker has an update and a couple of guests. I beg your pardon, James Kerr.
Well, actually, it's myself on this occasion, Noel. Yes, I'll give you a little update about what's happening in the Strangford constituency before I speak to Peter and Iris Robinson. It's quite interesting here. It was a good day yesterday here for the DUP, with Iris Robinson topping the poll and bringing Jim Shannon and George Ennis in behind her. Lord Kilclooney was also elected, coming second on first preference votes. But the expectation was that David McNary for the Ulster Unionists would pick up the 5th seat, and then it would be a two-way fight between the Alliance Party and the SDLP for the last remaining seat. Now, that is still quite likely what will indeed happen. However, Bob Little, the pro-agreement Ulster Unionist, is doing very well on the transfers, and it's not impossible that we could see actually a four-way fight between the two Ulster Unionists, the SDLP and the Alliance Party, for those two remaining seats. It's all going to be in the transfers, as it always is. You can stand here in front of the board forever and speculate as to what might happen. It's going to be a little time yet before we do get a clear result. With me now is Iris Robinson, who had a good day here yesterday. You've had a night to sleep on it and reflect on your victory. Clearly, you're very pleased.
Oh, absolutely. And what this election tells me in Strangford is this is a DUP seat for as long as we want it. The electorate have spoken. They've come behind our policies and our views, and I'm absolutely delighted.
But quite clearly, it's very possible that we could still get a significant number of pro-agreement candidates elected when we see how the transfer situation works out.
Well, Little and McNary, obviously they're in contention at the moment, but I would think that the votes could go to Little. But I have to correct you, both McNary and Little are pro-agreement. David McNary was a very close aide to David Trimble.
Yeah, that's the point.
There's no difference between the two characters that we're talking about.
That's the point that I'm making. We're not going to see a shift in the balance of pro and anti-agreement in this constituency.
Well, I disagree with you. They're coming in with a very weakened vote, and our vote is just a superb 20-odd% of an increase. I mean, that is wonderful.
Now, you talked yesterday a little bit about the extent to which you tried to manage the vote in this constituency. You've clearly done that. You've also clearly been able to get your vote out.
Absolutely. I mean, the people that come out in all of the rain and the freezing conditions were determined to cast their vote for the Democratic Unionist Party. We have a solid vote here now and will not be moved.
Peter Robinson, you're clearly down here to support your wife. Also, we have the count going on here for North Down. No one's been elected there yet. Are you expecting a reasonable return there too?
Well, I'm not down here primarily to support Iris. Iris doesn't need any support. She was in yesterday at the top of the poll, and her two colleagues elected as well. I'm down here principally for the North Down count. I think we have a very good chance of winning 2 seats there. That would be a massive sea change within North Down, and a very good chance of there being 3 anti-agreement unionists being elected in North Down, and that again would be a very strong message to the government if we were able to secure 3 seats in a constituency like North Down.
Are you willing to predict yet whether you will be the largest unionist party when we get to the end of the counting today?
Well, we're already the largest unionist party. We have more votes than any other party.
In terms of seats?
Well, in terms of seats, I can't see us being beaten. But the vagaries of the PR system are such that one shouldn't speculate at this stage. I predicted at the very beginning that we would have between 26 and 32 seats. I have no reason to change that prediction.
Peter Robinson, Iris Robinson, thank you both very much indeed. And I'm sure you'll come back to us here, Noel, when we have further news, further transfers and further candidates elected.
Oh, no doubt. We'll be hanging in your every word, James. Thank you very much indeed. Let's go for an update to Donna.
Thanks, Noel. Well, as it now stands, the second day of counting of the Assembly election votes is in its early stages. It resumed at 9 again this morning. It's expected to be discussed when the Prime Minister, Tony Blair, and the Taoiseach Bertie Ahern meet at the 5th summit of the British-Irish Council in Cardiff. Neither would respond to questions put to them by reporters about the election results. In Banbridge, a few minutes ago, the Ulster Unionist leader David Trimble arrived for today's count. He said he had every intention of remaining leader of the party.
I think it's rather unfortunate for Jeffrey to be so eager for the defeat of his party. And he's also premature. We will wait to see what the position is at the end of the day. And we will find at the end of the day, not only has the Ulster Unionist vote held up, and indeed, in first preference terms, increased its percentage share, But you will see as the count rolls through that we will end up with between 26 and 28 seats. And I have every expectation actually it'll be at the higher end of that range. And I think that's a different ballgame entirely.
Do you still think you'll be the largest Unionist party?
Will you still be the leader of the Ulster Unionist Party?
I have every intention of continuing as leader. I know that there is an important job to be done.
Arlene Foster, the anti-agreement Ulster Unionist, has held her seat in Fermanagh, South Tyrone. She said if the UUP polls behind Sinn Féin, somebody will have to take the blame, and she believes that should be the leadership. Sinn Féin have continued to make gains this morning. Geraldine Dugan has been elected in Mid-Ulster and Michelle Gildernew in Fermanagh, South Tyrone. In other news, detectives investigating the murder of James McMahon in Lisburn have revisited the scene. Police officers handed out leaflets to motorists last night to make an appeal for information. The 21-year-old was attacked by 3 masked men who beat him with baseball bats near the Island Civic Centre last Thursday night. Now, please let me know what you think of the election results as they come in. You can text us on 07786 202 200. Your normal text charge will apply, and please give us your name and tell us where you are from. You can email us at politicsni@bbc.co.uk, and if you're watching on digital satellite and you want to send us a message, then press your red button now and select Vote 03 Messages. Noel.
All this new technology, wonderful, isn't it? Right, time to kick around some of the prevailing themes with my studio guests again. Sinclair McAllister, former communications director for the DUP. David Trimble says he's got stickability. He's not saying it's all over.
Well, you would expect him at this stage to say that, but let's examine the situation. The DUP are going to at least draw and possibly win. So if we take a draw situation, Trimble then goes in. He has Jeffrey Donaldson, Burnside, Arlene Foster, who are going to be a nucleus for others in his party to join. And don't forget, there's those people on the fringes now who would be weakly pro-Trimble. And when they examine the actual votes they get, they're going to jump ship. So Trimble's going to be in real trouble no matter what happens. Now, if you push it that the DUP take over, his position really is untenable.
Yeah, but the point is that, I mean, you have not been taking seats from the Ulster Unionists. We've been talking about the decline of the small parties. You've been hoovering up a lot of those small parties. David Trimble will be able to say, my vote is up, as is the DUP's, not by so much, but my vote is up. So he's got a strong position.
But Noel, what's clear, if you take a first preference vote, so you take seats, there's a new dynamic in the Unionist community from the DUP and anti-agreement Unionists. And Trimble's going to have to deal with that. And he has real problems no matter what happens. And how he deals with that. But of course, I mean, the man's arrogance knows no bounds. So I would expect him at this stage, I would expect him, even if he lost every seat, to still say, I'm right. That's his nature.
All right. Seamus Mallon was asking for generosity in the new landscape. What generosity can we expect from the DUP?
Well, I think what's being shown here is a very good results for the DUP. Some outstanding results with Diane Dodds and Jim Wells. I think it's a good result for unionism because there is a new dynamic there. There's a new force, a new direction. I think it's a good result for Northern Ireland because if people take on board the Prime Minister, David Trimble, the pro-agreement parties take on the reality. This is a wake-up call to them that now we have an opportunity, a new political landscape, and that if people get their act together, we can go forward with a fair deal that will suit everybody. So it is good news. It is not extremist news. It is not a bad news. This is a good news day for Northern Ireland.
All right. Well, Gerry Adams concurs with that to a certain extent because he says at least we all want devolution.
Yes, the devolution. Yes.
So the DUP will have to act decisively in some way to bring that about at the earliest possible moment.
But the DUP already have done that. The DUP have policy documents. We talked about this the other day. They have ideas for the future. They will expound those ideas whenever they get round with the government. And interestingly enough, after Murphy's visit yesterday, what have we got? The DUP saying last night that already the government have been in touch and want to meet with them this weekend. That's the start of the reality check. This government, despite what Tony Blair might say, is going to have to take a reality check now that anti-agreement unionism is on the rise and he has to deal with it.
Stephen Farry, a good day for Northern Ireland?
I don't think so. I think we will now await with interest to hear these long-awaited proposals from the DUP as to how they're going to change the agreement. They've given us their critique of what's gone wrong with the agreement, but they've yet to give us their ideas on the way forward. I think the DUP and Sinn Féin will be pushed closer together in terms of eventually they will be talking to each other, either indirectly to begin with, but maybe eventually directly. However, if we look around the world, there's a fundamental lesson in that you can't actually hold a society together whenever you have the extremes in the ascendancy. If you look what's happening in the Middle East with the Israeli-Palestinian situation, where you've had the swings of the extremes, and that process has become deadlocked because you need a strong centre to pull
but
things
the DUP
forward.
don't see themselves as the extreme. They say we've got a majority of unionists. How can that be an extreme?
Well, simply, sure, the electorate have spoken. I think we all have to have a wake-up call as to what that means for the wider process.
So the extreme has become the main ground.
Well, I think the majority of people in Northern Ireland are still voting for pro-agreement parties. And even the majority of DUP supporters, as shown through opinion polls, actually want devolution to work.
Yes, because we've always been a devolutionist party.
Always
We've
been a devolutionist
that.
party.
In fact, we've been in the lead for that.
Particular, how are you going to make devolution work?
But we've always been in the lead for that.
How are you and Sinn Féin going to sit down and make devolution work?
This is the big problem that small parties have. You all get too big for your boots. You think that you control, that you have got all the monopoly and
well,
wisdom.
all political parties are guilty of that, of course.
Yeah, but these parties don't get the vote. And then they think that they've got the monopoly of wisdom, the monopoly of morals, that they can go along, and anybody that doesn't agree with them in the centre has got to be extremists.
I personally don't think it's anything like or anything near a disaster for Northern Ireland. I mean, the electorate has spoken. We have to accept what they've said. I think it's quite obvious that the DUP are in a sort of a transitional period as well. They are soft in their position, and I think that given a period of time that there will be some rapprochement, as David Irvine would say, eventually between Sinn Féin and the DUP. But I have to say as well, I find it a bit rich, you know, I have to say. Arlene Foster and Jeffrey Donaldson and people of that ilk calling for David Trimble's resignation. I mean, here's a man who has led a completely divided party, ill-disciplined party, and the ill-discipline has been from some of those individuals I've talked about, a party that had no idea, it seems, at vote management, and he has led them to a position where he has increased their vote by 1.4%.
No.
Yeah. And these people, and these are the ill-disciplined people. These are the people who divided the party. These are the people who ensured that the Ulster Unionist electorate were getting
but of course that
message.
increased vote is not a vote right down the line for David Trimble for the reasons you've just said.
And neither is it a vote right down the line for Jeffrey Donaldson or Arlene Foster. And what I would say is that
briefly, David,
this is a real wake-up call for the Ulster Unionist Party, and it's about getting your act together and start to act like a party.
We're hearing a lot about wake-up calls today, Seamus Mallon.
Yeah, let me put another wake-up call in, and it's this: you have made the statement, "We all want devolution." I put a question mark over that. There are major parties in this, as a result of this election, who can do without devolution, who would be quite happy to negotiate interminably for X number of years, who never made one effort during the pre-Good Friday negotiations to make an input in terms of devolution. Now, I put a question mark about all parties wanting devolution, and I'm anticipating a situation where, in effect, these protracted type of negotiations that would suit this party, and I'm talking about Sinn Féin, would actually be preventing devolution. The other statement that was made previously is that there's a new political landscape. There are new trees on the landscape, but the landscape hasn't changed. The reality is that whatever is going to be dealt with is going to be dealt with on the basis of the political structures which are here. And let me repeat something I said yesterday. There are three parts to this. There's the overall peace process. It will continue. There's the Good Friday Agreement, which will continue by the two governments in all of its aspects, apart from the institutions. There's the institutional aspect. There's where any major party has a veto on it. There's where they're going to have to accept the harsh realities of the Good Friday Agreement as stated for the institutions.
We will have
I
time
think if we look at those, then
we will have time to come back and discuss these issues.
let me finish this note.
Briefly, Seamus, please.
I think if we start looking at those, we might start getting a clearer position and a clearer vision of what might happen, and less nonsense talked about the county council elements of this in terms of election terms, rather than focusing on the future.
Seamus, thank you. We will have plenty of time to discuss all these issues. Let's go to Foyle, where Kieran Tourish awaits. Kieran,
Noel, well, the picture that's emerging in Foyle is a worrying one for the SDLP. We know already, of course, that there's been something of a 9% swing to Sinn Féin from the SDLP, and joining me now is Pat Ramsey from the party. Pat, where have all those SDLP votes gone?
Well, clearly it has been disappointing in the city that our percentage has went down. I think we are very pleased that the mandate that Mark Carruthers, our leader, has shown, and deservedly so, the leadership has shown in the city. You know, the poor turnout we're putting down, you know, a lot of apathy in the situation as well. But we went under this election with 3 MLAs for Foyle. I'm saying we will return to Stormont with 3 MLAs again.
This used to be an SDLP stronghold where you would have outpolled Sinn Féin by 2 to 1. On first preferences yesterday, you were ahead by 1,500 votes. As you look ahead to Westminster, that must be very concerning.
Of course it is, and I'm sure Mark and we will sit down and review the situation in respect of the city, in respect of issues, in respect of our organisation in the city, and we'll come out with a better party. This is a clear signal to us, but there's no meltdown as regards the SDLP in the city. We will continue on receiving the mandate as we truly deserve from people of the city, and work for the betterment of the people of the city as well once we enter Stormont again.
How confident are you that you can retain those 3 seats in Derry?
Well, I think at this stage, I think most people are saying, given the transfers, you know, how consistently the transfers have come, particularly from Mark and Mark's surplus. We have a candidate, unfortunately, who will be eliminated quite soon, and we're very confident that we will achieve the numbers required, maybe not to reach the quota, but to get 2 further candidates elected.
Has the John Hume factor been very significant in this election, in the sense that he hasn't brought out a bigger SDLP vote and your other party colleagues, including yourself, haven't benefited?
Well, clearly there's a number of factors. John Hume obviously has to be one of them. John has a personality vote that is second to none across Northern Ireland, and it has been affected in Foyle. But as I said before, John Hume has worked dedicatedly himself in the city and other constituencies as well, and we look forward to the European election when John is our candidate again, and maybe we'll retain and bring back some of the votes. There'll be probably, you know, people who haven't come out. There may have been a swing towards Sinn Féin in terms of percentage, but I don't think there's been an overall increase in Sinn Féin's vote in the city.
But you're looking nervously over your shoulder at Sinn Féin.
Well, clearly there's circumstances where, you know, we have to be truthful with ourselves. Sinn Féin have an increased mandate in the city. We'll have to look at ourselves and see how we can increase our own vote in the ballot boxes. But certainly we will be reviewing ourselves and think we will come out of it a better party.
Pat Ramsey from the SDLP, thank you for joining us, and with that it's now back to you in Belfast.
Kieran, thank you very much indeed. Let's go straight to Lagan Valley, where Jeffrey Donaldson MP, who of course topped his poll there with a large vote yesterday. Hello again, Mr. Donaldson.
Hello.
David Trimble says you're unfortunately over-eager to be calling for his demise. Are you?
Well, first of all, Noel, let me deal with what Davey Adams had to say there, because I think Davey's a little out of touch with what's happening. He talked about David Trimble having managed things well. Davey, in every constituency in Northern Ireland bar South Belfast, a clear majority of Unionists voted for anti-agreement candidates. Over all of Northern Ireland, anti-agreement candidates are winning 2 to 1 votes from the Ulster Unionist electorate. That's the reality of the situation. The reality in Lagan Valley, Davey talked about vote management. We look like we're going to take the 3rd seat here in Lagan Valley. So Davey, you know, get your facts straight. We have done well in this constituency. The Ulster Unionist vote in this constituency is up by over 5,000 votes. So I think we've done pretty well.
All right, well, let's get back to that issue of David Trimble's leadership. Now, he says he's got stickability, he's not saying goodbye to anybody, and he says you're unfortunately eager.
Well, I am eager to see the Ulster Unionist Party get out of the mess that it's in. I never thought I would see the day, Noel, that my party would end up 3rd behind Sinn Féin, the Republican Party.
Well, not least some would say because you've been stabbing David Trimble in the back for the last 5 years.
Well, Noel, who got the votes in this election? Let's get real here. I've increased the vote in Lagan Valley substantially.
Yeah.
The electorate have given a clear message to the Ulster Unionist Party. The last 5.5 years haven't delivered what they had hoped for. It has been a series of failed negotiations. They don't want to go back to that. It's time for change. They want a better agreement. That's the clear, overwhelming message now of the Unionist community. By 2 to 1, Unionists have voted for a better agreement, and the Ulster Unionist Party needs to get that message.
All right, not for a new agreement, but for a better agreement. A better agreement could result from the review process.
Well, let's see what happens. There will be negotiations after the election. We need changes. That's what the Unionist electorate have voted for overwhelmingly in this election. And anyone who ignores that, whether it's the government whether it's Sinn Féin, the SDLP or anyone else, is really flying in the face of reality. The only agreement that will work in Northern Ireland is one that has a consent of the majority of Unionists and the majority of Nationalists. The Unionist community yesterday withdrew its consent for the agreement. That's the reality.
And when these negotiations start, will you be going in with David Trimble or with Ian Paisley?
I'll be going in with other Unionists to try and get the changes that we need. That's what I want to see, and indeed during the election campaign we called for the Ulster Unionists and DUP to cooperate after the election to maximise Unionist representation in the negotiations.
Sorry to interrupt. Do you expect the two governments to talk to your branch of Ulster Unionism separately from David Trimble?
I expect them to talk to the Unionists who speak for the majority of the Unionist electorate.
Well, David Trimble speaks for the majority of the Ulster Unionist Party.
Well,
clearly
with respect, Noel, well, that may be the case for now. Let's wait and see what happens.
Well, what do you mean by that? I mean, there's going to be half a dozen perhaps people on your side of the party. The party could have 26, 28 seats, so there's going to be 20, 21 people who are fully behind David Trimble.
Well, the reality is that in the Assembly and in the country, a majority of Unionists are anti-agreement. They want change. They want a better agreement. And we can't ignore that reality. And anybody, Noel, who thinks we can simply pick up where we left off before the elections with a kind of sequence deal that went completely wrong and has been judged wrong by the Unionist electorate, they are fooling themselves. That is a delusion. There is time. It is time for change. That's what the Unionist electorate has voted for. They want change. They want people to go in and negotiate a better agreement than the one we've had, the one that has failed us. We have no assembly. The decommissioning process has become a farce, and the people have given their judgment.
If David Trimble were to go, would you seek to take his place and lead that largely pro-agreement party?
Well, what I've said, Noel, is if a vacancy arises for the leadership, well, then I will consider going forward at that stage.
OK, Jeffrey Donaldson, thank you very much indeed. Let's go straight to Balmoral, where Michael McGimpsey, the former Ulster Unionist minister, of course, was elected yesterday. Michael McGimpsey, hello to you.
Hello,
you've heard, I hope, what Jeffrey Donaldson had to say. It's really time David Trimble said goodbye.
Well, I think that is certainly a premature comment. I think what we have to say is that the party overall, the vote is up overall. I think when you try to break it down between pro and anti-agreement Ulster Unionists, Peter Robinson had it right before the election. He said all Ulster Unionist candidates are candidates for the Ulster Unionist Party, and he urged everybody not to vote for him. So,
I'm sorry, I have to interrupt you. It's rather awkward because you're not in the same room, but sorry to interrupt you. But Jeffrey Donaldson points out that across Northern Ireland, 2-1, Unionists have voted against the agreement. That's the reality.
I think we have a long way to go today. Let's wait and see what the election actually says, and what the electorate have actually said to us by tonight. I think it's much too premature to be starting to predict what's actually going to happen. This is a transfer system, and you have to wait until the last vote is cast, and a lot is going to happen today.
So what happens in these negotiations? You have Jeffrey Donaldson's going to be leading a fairly strong half a dozen people within your own party who are very deeply opposed to your party's official position. How's that going to work out?
Well, I think that's a matter for the party through discussion, debate, argument, call it what you want, which we will do, but it should be done behind closed doors. It should be done within party meetings and not done here, for example, in television studios on the morning of an election result. I think that's the way, the Ulster Unionist way, that's the way we do things and should do things in the Ulster Unionist Party, and then we will determine a way forward.
But if David Trimble does end up heading an Ulster Unionist Party which is behind the DUP already in terms of first preference vote, possibly in terms of seats, could even be behind Sinn Féin, can he really have any credibility as a party leader?
Well, I think what you've got to do is wait until the end of the day. Everybody's being very premature here. Let's look at the results in this afternoon, this evening, when they're all come through. As I say, this is an STV election. You're well aware that there are very large numbers of seats still to be declared. Let's wait and see what actually happens and then start passing judgments. And I think there are a number of comments I've no doubt that can be made, and a lot of conclusions can be drawn, and not simply knee-jerk conclusions that are currently being drawn this morning.
All right, Michael McGimpsey, thank you very much indeed. Let's go and see how the figures are shaping up with Mark.
OK, Noel, thank you very much indeed. Some more results coming in over the past few moments. We have now got 59, I think it is, MLAs declared, 49 still to go. The total, of course, 108. So let's look at our virtual chamber. We're going to fly through The front of Parliament buildings into the chamber. We're going to start over on the right-hand side with the Democratic Unionist Party, and there you can see they have 22 MLAs. That's in fact 2 more than they had in 1998, and we're still a long way from being finished. The Ulster Unionists 15, Progressive Unionist Party, David Irvine there 1. He held his seat in East Belfast. Over to the other side of the House, and you can see Sinn Féin there with 15, the SDLP alongside them with 4, and in the middle we have Naomi Long of the Alliance Party, who inherited Lord Alderdice's seat in East Belfast, and Dr Kieran Deaney, who campaigned as an independent in West Tyrone to retain and enhance hospital services in his hometown of Omagh. Mark Devenport, one other addition to make. I'm just hearing that Maurice Morrow of the DUP has been returned for Fermanagh South Tyrone, so that makes the DUP total in fact 23.
Yes, and I see on the wires also flashing Billy Bell coming in Lagan Valley. I don't know if that's within the Ulster Unionist figures we've got there, but that's a recent declaration there. So yeah, both of those expected.
Now, we've been doing some very interesting number crunching. I know people think we don't do very much here other than watch results coming in, but you and Sydney have been furiously scribbling away here. Give us your predictions for what you think it might look like, because there are obviously very tight fights going on in some constituencies, but it is possible to do quite a bit of prediction at this stage.
Well, we're certainly looking at the DUP looking at about 30 seats, and the Ulster Unionists maybe about 27 seats or so. In terms of the Sinn Féin tally, well, we could be looking at 25 or 26 or even 24. The SDLP could be as low as 18, could be higher up near the 20. Now, one game that we've been playing, or mathematical game that Sydney has been playing here, is to say, well, what would that mean in terms of ministries? Now, this is a little bit academic, because obviously the government looking at this situation isn't going to say, all right, let's get the Assembly up and running on Monday and let's run de Hont. But if Sydney and I decided to recall the Assembly, Sydney has run de Hont for us.
Right.
And it's given us some surprising results.
Yes, a few changes. We should remember we had an Ulster Unionist First Minister and an SDLP Deputy First Minister. Take us through what it might look like if Paul Murphy triggers de Hont next week.
Well, if we move to, say, the ministries rather than the First Minister, Deputy First Minister, but
that's a big question. Somebody actually has to vote for them. So
a very big question.
Let's presume we've taken that one out of the scenario.
We'll come to that as the most important, most difficult one. But say, as it stands with DUP with 30 seats, they would probably have 3 ministries instead of 2 this time. The Ulster Unionists, if they have 27, are probably on the 3, Sinn Féin with 3 if they have 26, and SDLP at the minute, if their share is at 17, they might have 2. If their share is 19 seats, they might have, if their share is 17, they might have 1. If their share is 19, they might have 2. So in a sense, a lot to play for in terms of the overall composition.
It's looking like, one interesting thing there, though, is that it is looking like 6 Unionist ministers to 4 Nationalist ministers. However, the battle shakes down within nationalism rather than the 5-5 that we inherited. A lot of people felt that this 5-5 was part of the agreement, that there was always going to be the same number of Unionist and Nationalist ministers, but the consolidation of the Unionist vote into the 2 big parties brings them an extra ministry if we ever get a power-sharing executive again, which is a big if.
Yeah, and it all comes with a bit of a health warning. The point is that is potentially a very big hit for the SDLP, who went from having more ministries and being Deputy First Minister to perhaps just having 1 ministry.
Being the junior partner in government, just hanging on in there.
And it is a bit academic on First Minister and Deputy First Minister, but we better
I'll tell you why
extrapolate
I'll tell you why it is academic, because it's a key decision. And it's a majority of voters of members of the Assembly from each community has got to support First Minister, Deputy First Minister. So it's not an automatic, if the Ulster Unionists were second largest party, that they have second place and the DUP have first place. It's got to be a vote with the majority of each bloc voting for that individual. So the individual counts and the party counts, and the total may not be the absolute thing which determines it.
Yeah, when we say that the government may well just engage in a long talks process now and not recall this Assembly, it's all down to that First and Deputy First Minister vote, because can you imagine the DUP voting for Martin McGuinness or Gerry Adams? Can you imagine Sinn Féin voting for Ian Paisley?
Yeah. No, you can't. But the possibility is there that certainly you could be looking at a DUP First Ministry, a Sinn Féin Deputy First Ministry. Though it would be hard to see it voted through but it's an option.
Well, it's an option, but not as we know it, you know.
Okay, right. We're getting really into the realms of fantasy. Let's just have a little bit more analysis here. Here's the swing from the SDLP to Sinn Féin in 6 key constituencies, Mark.
Yes, and in Newry we've seen that the big hit that they've taken there, the SDLP losing out a seat, some other significant swings, West Tyrone, Sinn Féin putting on votes, but in fact the gain has gone to the hospital campaigner. South Down, they're still looking at a gain there. East London, Derry, that's the Francie Brolly seat.
Okay, Sydney, this is now the picture as far as the DUP's best performances are concerned. And we need to be very careful about what we're comparing here. I think Jim Wells was on the phone. He was very pleased with his performance in South Down. He thinks he put on 40% on his performance last time, which he did in terms of votes. But what we're saying is this was the share in 1998, this is the share in 2003, and this is the net difference.
Yes, in a sense, personal vote getters are very important, but in effect what we're looking at is a net change in party share. And you can see from that Strangford's topping that, North Down, this whole area then said, and East Antrim, look at those figures in and around the Belfast area, the concentration, the way in which the net share of DUP has increased. All targeted areas, and also targeted areas during the district council elections of 2001. So in a sense, these votes won in 2001, capitalised and increased in this election now.
Okay, you can see the constituencies that are relevant also coloured over in the little map on the right. It doesn't mean the DUP didn't perform well in other constituencies, it just means these are the 7 constituencies where the party performed at its very best compared to its performance in 1998. Let's do the same thing for the Ulster Unionist Party, Mark.
Well, yeah, I mean, here you see that the Ulster Unionists are saying, look, our vote has actually held, and indeed it has, and most significantly in Lagan Valley with the help of Geoffrey Donaldson's 14,000 votes.
It's not very likely that David Trimble will thank Geoffrey for that.
Well, he's taking the credit to some extent when he's saying, look, our votes held. He's not saying our votes have held, thanks very much, Geoffrey. But they've held partly because of those kind of performances, bringing in the Geoffrey Donaldsons, the David Burnsides, also because in some other areas such as East Belfast they've shifted over into alliance territory. You can see sort of pro-agreement unionism nibbling into alliance territory there.
Okay, this is the flip side of that particular picture. These are the worst performances for the Ulster Unionist Party as compared to 1998. Again, the corresponding constituencies lit up. I mean, quite interesting just geographically, Sydney, isn't it?
Yes.
That they're all on the top half, broadly. Most of them on the top half of that picture.
East London, Derry again, say DUP focusing in and around their MP for the constituency, Gregory Campbell, losing share of vote that way. Paul Berry losing it to him in the south of the constituency. And the others really quite small in terms of the losses.
But they have held their own by and large, and most of these drops in share, they haven't actually lost seats, so they won't be too worried about that if they still deliver the same number of seats. They'll be worried, however, if the DUP, through all these surprising victories in places like West Belfast, North Down, actually comes out on top.
And David Trimble is still saying that while they may now be behind the Democratic Unionist Party in terms of first preference share, and that is indisputable because those figures are now all in, the number of seats David Trimble is predicting should hold up.
Yeah. Remember, yes, and in all probability that's the case. And remember with the vote share and the increases, that for a quota they should need 14.3% of the vote. So in a sense, if you have a gain of 20%, you're likely to get 1 additional seat. So in a sense, it's that you've got to bear in mind.
There's a quote from Mr. McCorber, I think, in Dickens that I'll get some of our viewers to try and dig out about result happiness if you have £1 of expense and you've got £1 and 5 pence to pay for it, and result misery if you've got 5 pence less. The problem with the Ulster Unionists right now is, okay, they've got the same amount of money as they ever had, but the prices have just gone up in the shops.
Right. Things are tragic when you start trying to quote Dickens at this time in the morning. But
I hope somebody's going to sort me out.
There's some sad soul out there who's furiously now reached for his mobile phone to text us in exactly what the quote is. Okay, thank you. Noel, you can take that one and do with it what you will.
Let me try it. Annual income, £19. Annual expenditure, £18, 19 and sixpence. Result, happiness. Annual income, £19. Annual income, £19 and sixpence. Result, misery. Something like that anyway. Hey, it is early in the morning. So no, the figures are wrong, but the idea is right. Okay, we're on our travels again. Chris Capper is in West Tyrone.
Yes, no, we're in the nitty-gritty here of the transfers, and at the moment we're looking at eliminations that are going to bring in the DUP and possibly Derek Hussey for the Ulster Unionist. No change there, one Ulster Unionist, one DUP seat, although a change of face for the DUP with Tom Buchanan becoming the DUP's man in place of Oliver Gibson. But we can look much clearly now at how this is all going to pan out unless something really strange happens with transfers. And what we're looking at is that Sinn Féin are not going to take a third seat here and that Eugene McMenamin will hang on for the SDLP. That's if the transfers go the way they should. Fingers been pointed really at Dr. Deaney, the hospital candidate. He took a lot of votes from Joe Byrne from the SDLP. He's now going to lose his seat. It looks very likely indeed. And of course he's an SDLP member of the policing board, so some problems there to be sorted out. And of course Sinn Féin say that Dr. Deaney also took votes from them, and that would appear to be borne out by the transfers of his surplus. Quite a lot of those went on to Barry McElduff, who'd be the other Sinn Féin candidate to be elected along with Pat Doherty.
Very much indeed. Let's go for an upsum to Donna.
Yes, we have some of your comments on the election. Mark from Dromore calls for Jeffrey Donaldson to be the Ulster Unionist Party leader to save unionism, he says. Robert in South Antrim says, I voted for the DUP in South Antrim, but I support the Good Friday Agreement. Mark in Belfast says the vote in Northern Ireland is a joke. It's no more than a representation of the percentage of Catholics and Protestants living here, not which is best. Sean O'Brien from Coleraine says it's a pity that the Green Party did not get a seat because environmentalists have lost out. We need someone to fight for us, he says, save the trees. Angela from Dungannon says only the DUP called at her house before the election, so how do others expect to get in when they don't even bother? Laura from Coleraine says the DUP deserve to be doing so well. Marcus from Carrickfergus says tell Gerry Adams the DUP haven't gone away, you know. John from Carrickfergus says Northern Ireland is an abnormal society, hence the rise of the DUP and Sinn Féin, a crazy result for a crazy country, he says. Anne from Armagh says it's really sick that religion tops the Northern Ireland political agenda once again. What about the real issues? Well done to Kieran Deaney on the Omagh Hospital issue. And Kieran in London says, should the DUP get their way and the Assembly does not get up and running, will they hand back their salaries? Please let us know what you think about the results as they come in. You can text us on 07786 202 200. Your normal text charge will apply, and please give us your name and tell us where you are calling from. You can also email us at politicsni@bbc.co.uk. Noel.
Donna, thank you. Barbara de Bruin of Sinn Féin has joined my panel, but I want to go first to Stephen Farry. Stephen, we were playfully, or the chaps there were playfully talking about the distribution of ministries. You were pointing out that, in fact, it's more serious than that.
Yes, the first task in the new Assembly has to be to elect a Speaker. As you know, Lord Allardyce was standing down. John Gorman stood down, and it's likely that the two existing Deputy Speakers will both lose their seats. So who's going to be the Speaker of the Assembly? Now, I think the convention, or it's actually in the standing orders, is that the oldest member takes the chair in the first sitting. I think that's likely to be Ian Paisley Senior. So it should be a very interesting first sitting of the Assembly.
Well, there you go.
Let's put this right.
Yeah.
The first function is not to elect a Speaker. A Speaker can be there, as Lord Allardyce was, without ever being appointed. Lord Allardyce was never appointed Speaker. The first thing that has got to happen is the election of a First and Deputy First Minister. There's a time scale on that.
Yes,
There's a number of weeks, 6 weeks. And, you know, let's go back to Paul Murphy's little visit yesterday, because when I read it this morning and what he said, there was a little time bomb lying within it, where he talked about the salaries, which he shouldn't have done during account, and he said, but this will be a limited event. Paul Murphy was laying down a timescale in his own gentle, quiet Welsh way. Now, that timescale is something which will have to coincide with the 6 weeks period, or else then the two governments and the parties have to contrive. When David Trimble and I first became First and Deputy First Ministers, it was provided in the legislation for a period of First and Deputy First Ministers designate. There isn't in these circumstances.
Right. Well, we could have another election in 6 weeks'
So
time.
let's see how the manipulation goes in relation to that. And my advice to everybody is, as far as these two governments are concerned, watch them like hawks.
Okay, I want to bring in Barbara de Bruin. You will have a chance to come back on that other issue, Davey Adams. Barbara de Bruin, good afternoon to you, or good morning to you. Just looking at West Belfast first, Diane Dodd's election, is a good thing, is it not, that unionist quota has a voice now, which it hasn't had for 20 years?
Well, I mean, I'm not going to say that the electorate doesn't have the right to elect whoever they have done.
But for the area, isn't it good that number of people, there is a quota there, so it's good that they have a voice, or not?
I might be doubtful personally about the voice, but just as I asked people to respect my mandate, I respect Diane Dodd's mandate. I might have all sorts of views about the DUP, but in the end of the day, the whole idea of having an election is we say to people, you have a voice, you have the right to elect people, and we let them go out.
But irrespective of who was elected to express that voice, isn't it a good thing that community should have a voice, which has been denied it for 20 years?
Well, I don't think the community has been denied a voice for 20 years, and I think it's a little unfortunate to suggest that because we have an overwhelmingly nationalist electorate, that somehow we who were elected in the past didn't do our jobs. I think we did do our jobs. I think we did our jobs well, just as those overwhelmingly or mixed constituencies and other constituencies
but on
did
a wider
their job.
scale, Gerry Adams doesn't represent those people at Westminster. He doesn't go. So their voice is denied to them at a parliamentary level.
The very clear happening in any constituency in a divided society is that some people end up having representatives of other hue. Those who have constituencies who have Republican representatives, or I believe wider nationalist representatives, have had people who have tried to work for everybody. And I don't think it's right to try and pretend, or even to play devil's advocate this morning and say that somehow that has been against democracy. Just as I respect the mandate today, I think people should have respected the mandate in the past.
But it clearly is. If someone is elected to represent people in Parliament and doesn't go to Parliament, he's not representing them there. Quod erat demonstrandum.
No. The work has been clearly done. People knew before they elected Gerry Adams what Gerry Adams was going to stand for. He has been outstanding. He's recognised throughout the world as a statesman, as somebody who has made a tremendous impact on politics here, who is
it's
changing
a case of a prophet
the face
not being recognised in his own country then,
Well,
because he's certainly not recognised as that in Northern Ireland.
Well, he might not be recognised as that on the BBC, but he is most certainly recognised as that. That's why our vote's going up. That's why our vision is being recognised. That's why we are clearly being seen as problem solvers, as people who are going to move things forward, and as people who speak for those who want to see progress.
Is that how you see Gerry Adams, Davey Adams, as a former representative of the loyalist voice?
I think certainly, and you know...
You certainly do think he is?
No. If you let me finish my sentence, Noel.
Had me worried for a moment there.
Before you adopt your Rottweiler approach. He certainly has contributed to the peace process, there's no doubt about that. I am delighted that any unionist, and it doesn't matter to me from what party they came, that a unionist has been elected in West Belfast to represent those people who haven't been represented at all. And that is the nature of the politics here, that they weren't represented. Now they have a voice, and I don't care from what unionist party they're from.
All right, I want to take you back to Jeffrey Donaldson, because you said that Jeffrey Donaldson had got it wrong, that David Trimble had led the party wonderfully for the last few years, a divided party. Jeffrey Donaldson says, Davey Adams, you're completely out of touch.
Yeah. Well, just on some simple arithmetic, and this isn't even as complicated as the Dickens example, there were well over 3 quotas in Lagan Valley. There were 3 anti-agreement unionists standing without vote management, and I'm delighted that Billy Bell has been elected, or looks as if he's going to be elected. Without vote management, Jeffrey's vote, combined with his 2 anti-agreement colleagues, managed to get 2 anti-agreement people elected and 1 pro-agreement. If there had been any sort of vote management and not an ego-boosting vote for Jeffrey, the 3 anti-agreement people would have been elected, no problem. It's not for him to explain to me, it's to explain to the guy who didn't make it, Kirkpatrick. And as regards David Trimble, I think the fact remains that a completely divided party, a completely ill-disciplined party, complete and absolute lack of any idea, it seems to me, of vote management, except in a few constituencies, and Trimble leads them to a 1.4 increase in their vote. I think, considering the state of politics as well...
Are you looking for a seat, Mr Adams, an Ulster Unionist seat somewhere?
No, I'm delighted to be once again enjoying elections, because I'm not taking part in them.
You're making a good bid for it there. Seamus Mallon, you have Barbara de Broom beside. You've talked about the need for generosity. What generosity do you want from Sinn Féin?
Well, first of all, to deal with this whole business of arms, don't anybody try to tell me, because I know what happens in these negotiations, that Sinn Féin didn't know that David Trimble couldn't deliver if there was not the type of openness about it that he requested. Don't tell me that they forgot, the Ulster Unionists forgot that there was a confidentiality clause. Don't tell me that the two governments didn't know the day before that there was a confidentiality clause and that the debacle which they had organised for the next day would turn out to be that. Now, all of that said, the issue of arms has got to be dealt with. Let it be done in a generous way, where in effect unionism can look and say, yeah, for the first time we are now convinced that this has happened. Let them also show very clearly, in ways which are tangible, that the whole paramilitary past is behind them. Now, one simple way of doing that is make sure that this type of thuggery in terms of kneecapping people, punishment beatings, the use of racketeering within constituencies, that those are dealt with. Here. Now, let me draw the conclusion. Yep. If I make the point, I have to draw the conclusion. That's a type of generosity which now, in my view, should be done from a position of strength by Sinn Féin. Have they got the will to do that, or are they into another tactic which will be to keep negotiations going for another year so that they can spin out another unionist party?
The message is simple: get on with it.
Very clearly, we have been given a vote because we are clearly doing business. We are clearly moving forward. We are clearly showing leadership. There's something that's missing here, which is last night on TV and on radio, we heard the rejectionist unionists and we heard the DUP, and what was clearly coming through from them was that the major issue for them isn't even the question of arms, but the whole question of the agreement, the whole question of the way.
They could argue this because they've been waiting 5 years for this wonderful decommissioning and acts of completion, which simply have not happened.
They could, but they didn't. What they're talking about, and I see you have some of the DUP paperwork there, the election literature they put, they're talking about things like a commitment to a minimalist Bill of Rights. They have problems with the Good Friday Agreement, they've problems with equality, they've problems with North-South, so that there are all sorts of things.
What Seamus Mallon said to you was that the Republican movement, that armed wing of it, has got to do what it said it would do, and it's got to do it quickly.
He's also saying that somehow is going to solve the DUP problem.
No, I didn't say that.
Which it isn't going to do.
I didn't say that.
So the second thing, to deal with Seamus's decision to have a go at Republicans this morning, when the electorate clearly sees that Republicans are doing their best.
But are you blind to the fact that...
Will you let me answer the question?
There's lots of questions and lots of answers. I'm trying to pin you down in this. Do you not, or are you blind to the fact that for so many unionists, transparent decommissioning, an end to the punishment shootings, the punishment beatings, the drug dealing, the Stormont gates, the spy rings, whatever all these things are going on, some yet unproven, of course. Are you blind to the fact that if that were all to stop, that the unionist approach to the whole process would be transformed?
First of all, I'm not blind to anything. I am very, very clear of what is at stake in this society, and it is very complex, and it is very detailed, and we have been working on all of this. Secondly, Republicans have taken risks, Republicans have taken initiatives, Republicans have engaged in an unprecedented dialogue with unionists and will continue to do so. What is also very clear is that we have made efforts that came very close, and there was a sequence laid out. And it wasn't Republicans that stopped that sequence, and it wasn't just unionists that stopped the sequence either. The two governments part of that sequence hasn't been resolved either. Now, all of us, not just Republicans and not just whoever Seamus decides to dump on this morning, but all of us together have to work to move that forward.
So you will be renewing your efforts to move the IRA forward?
I will be renewing my efforts to move everything forward.
Including the IRA?
I will make it clear that I don't have a singular focus. Maybe there's some people here have an obsession with the IRA when there have been loyalist killings, people coming close to death, somebody losing their eye. Somehow we have somehow missed all of that. But
you know, we focus on the
doorsteps,
IRA because of the issue of government. I mean,
no, you focus on the IRA because that's what you want to blame for the process.
No, not at all. Unionist politicians in this studio condemned the attacks on Catholics and all the things that have happened, and condemned the activities of loyalist paramilitaries.
Who has raised this issue but me in all of this election campaign, in all of the programmes, in all of the discussions, while these were actually happening in the election campaign? Who else raised them? Did you? Did the Unionists?
Of course we did. We raised them every time they happened.
No, you didn't. Not in the middle of the election campaign, and not now. I'm the one that has introduced this.
Well, I've just raised it. I've just said that Unionist politicians...
No, I've raised it and you had to respond. Now, let's look at a whole complex situation here, and let's say that we have a way of moving forward. Republicans recognise that. We are problem solvers, and Sinn Féin will be in there with the two governments and the other parties, ensuring that there is a way of moving forward. But that ensures that everybody knows
I don't
that
expect
everybody
you to be
has
able
a
to put pressure on loyalist paramilitaries, but I expect the Republican movement to be able to put pressure on the IRA. So will you do that?
I don't intend to play the condemnation putting pressure game. I intend to create political contexts in which everybody feels that they can move forward, because if you look at the years there were before we went into the negotiations with this positive approach, there was nothing. Within September 1997, we went into negotiations.
You were dragged into by the SDLP, of course.
No, we weren't. And let me finish. We went in September 1997, and by April 1998, you had an agreement. We have looked and showed a more positive way forward. That is working. The people have endorsed that, and let's continue with it.
But you're missing one point, and it is this. I want to call the bluff of the DUP, by the way, and the anti-agreement people, because when they say they're anti-agreement, they haven't said where. What they are saying is they are anti a type of administration, a type of institution.
We're moving back to another subject. We will have time to discuss this.
It's very much relevant.
We will have plenty of time to discuss all of these issues. We're going to Upper Band for a quick update from Conor McCauley.
Noel, the DUP last night were suggesting they had a shot at a third seat here. I think after David Simpson, their candidate, was elected, they were privately conceding they were just going to take the two, and that has now happened. Dennis Watson, the third DUP candidate, the prominent Orange man, has been excluded, and his vote has taken in his running mate, Stephen Moutry. David Trimble was at the count this morning. We saw his fairly bullish reaction to Jeffrey Donaldson's comments on his leadership, and it appears to be some good news for David Trimble here. It looks like that all-important sixth seat is going to go to Samuel Gardner, his pro-agreement running mate, and not to George Savage, who ran a kind of a hybrid campaign, who campaigned with both pro and anti-agreement members of the UUP, and that mixed message appears to have worked against him. Now, after that, we believe that Dolores Kelly is going to take the seat for the SDLP, last held by Breege Rogers. And John O'Dowd, who outpolled Dara O'Hagan in first preferences for Sinn Féin, is going to replace Dr O'Hagan as the MLA. So it looks like 5 new faces here in Upper Ban. David Trimble, the only incumbent MLA to be returned. A lot of new faces up there at Stormont if and when the Assembly is recalled.
Thank you, Conor, very much indeed. Let's go to South Antrim, where Martin Meehan of Sinn Féin and David Ford, the Alliance leader, wait for me. David Ford, to you first. Seamus Close has been elected in Lagan Valley. That'll come as something of a relief to you?
Well, it was always going to happen, no, but it's certainly good news when he finally reaches the stage.
OK, so Eileen Bell, quietly confident in North Down, but you're still under a lot of pressure in other seats.
Well, as I understand
not least your own.
Naomi Long has been elected, Eileen Bell Seamus Close has been elected, Eileen Bell and Sean Leeson are definitely certain. Kieran McCarthy and I are both still in fighting.
All right, and you're going to be fighting to the bitter end there with Martin Meehan, who's beside you. How's it looking at the moment? You said last night that you felt you were marginally ahead?
No, the result is that on the figures on the board at the moment, Mr Meehan is ahead. He's 360 ahead of me at the moment, but there are a number of unionist transfers to come through, and we're looking to see exactly whether they come through as far as me or not.
Yeah, you're unlikely, Martin Meehan, to get unionist transfers, aren't you?
Yes, but we're not expecting to get unionist transfers. They're in SDLP. There's two SDLP candidates. One of them will be eliminated shortly. Then we will get significant transfers from that eliminated SDLP candidate, Mr McLennan. Our figures are showing us it's going to be 20% of transfers, which will take us well over the line. I am extremely confident and supremely confident that we're going to take this seat in South Antrim. And saying that there, for the nationalist people here, this is a major historical breakthrough. and I am humbled that the fact that I am elected here today, and I will be representing the nationalist people who have been discriminated, dominated, and as far as I'm concerned, the issue here in South Antrim, the nationalist people now are off their knees, and we go forth with confidence for the future.
All right, when do you think this seat will be decided, gentlemen? David Ford.
Stage 11, maybe 4 or 5 o'clock this afternoon if we're lucky. We've had a very slow count here so far.
And if
I would also like to say,
go ahead.
I would also like to say that Mr. Ford could possibly take a seat, but it won't be at the expense of Sinn Féin. And I would like to say too that the fact that he put on his posters, making our Ford, the choice is yours. To me, that was a negative issue to actually employ in this election, and I think it has backfired on him.
Do you want to come back to that, David Ford?
Well, I think the answer is quite simple. We have run a very positive campaign for the Alliance Party for the last 5 years and all we've been doing in the Assembly. We have run a very positive campaign through the election. But if you saw what happened in the last Dáil election in Dublin, a number of people put up posters which put specific messages as to what the concentrating issue was the last 48 hours. That's what we did. It was perfectly obvious. All the media knew, all the pundits knew the last seat was going to be decided between the two people standing in front of you today, Noel. And I think there was no harm in reminding people of that. We reminded people in every part of South Antrim that was the case. It was not a sectarian tactic. It was not a tactic directed at people from one section of the community. It was a simple reminder. Did people want somebody who had carried out the record the Alliance Party had carried for the last 5 years, or did they wish to switch to Sinn Féin? We will see in a few hours' time how that is resolved.
If you don't win this, sorry, Mr. Meehan, if you don't win this seat, David Ford, what are the implications for the Alliance Party caucus in the Assembly? Eileen Bell to be acting leader? Will you resign as leader?
The answer is no. If you think, having said all the way through the last 2 days and indeed through the last month and beyond it, that it was going to be a tight fight to the wire between Martin Meehan and myself, if you think I'm going to start speculating on the basis of the result a few hours before it happens, I'm afraid you're mistaken.
Well, there's no harm in asking. Mr. Meehan, you're anxious to get in.
You keep asking, but I'll keep refusing until we've seen
well,
the
that's
numbers
nothing new.
finally declared at the last stage.
Okay, Mark Meehan.
When the seat actually comes into the hands of Sinn Féin in South Antrim, as I said, this is an historical breakthrough. I would like to dedicate this seat to two men in particular.
Well, you haven't won it yet. You haven't won it yet, Mark Meehan. So let's hold the dedications until 5 o'clock this afternoon. Gentlemen, thank you both very much indeed. We're going to South Belfast. Alex Maskey is with us. Mr. Maskey, good afternoon to you, or is it still good morning? Just good morning, and congratulations. Big victory for you. I mean, you didn't poll terribly well in the Westminster election, 7 or 8% if I recall. So what do you believe accounts for this increase?
Well, remember, I'm just in this constituency now 2 years. I've been a councillor now since 2001. And of course the electorate have placed me in second with the second largest number of first preference votes, and I'm very, very pleased and grateful for that. Now, as far as I'm concerned, support in South Belfast, like other constituencies, has came to myself as a candidate for two reasons. First of all, the party has put a very important project to the constituency on the doorsteps, and myself as a candidate, I think, have demonstrated an ability and a capacity to work for people right across the community here. So I think, thankfully and gratefully, the representatives, the people rather of South Belfast have put their trust in myself as one of their elected representatives, and I'm deeply grateful for that.
And do you think the Lord Mayorship helped?
Well, there's no doubt about that, because on the doorsteps routinely people were saying to me how they thought of my tenure as a mayor, and I simply explained that I was very pleased to have the opportunity and privileged to have the opportunity to be the mayor of Belfast, and I think I demonstrated the way in which that office should be used. It should be used to treat people as equals, and I think that in that capacity I was able to show people in South Belfast that here you have a Sinn Féin member who clearly is able to represent people of all political persuasions and those of none. And that's what elected representatives have to do once they're in office, and I will pledge to do that once my seat is declared, hopefully later on this afternoon.
I didn't see them myself, but I heard you had election posters up on the edges of fringes of loyalist areas of the constituency. Do you call that reaching out?
Well, the democratic process is about putting your message to the people, and Noel, let me assure you that I have been in substantial sections of the constituency in South Belfast, and I was very, very pleased with the response that I got throughout. Many media commentators have already commented how my campaign was run. It was a very effective campaign. It was addressed very much as a representative for all of the people, and I have received transfers from all of the other candidates who have been eliminated so far. So there is an appeal that I've been able to put to people on the doorsteps. I've been honest with people. I've told them I will work hard for them in the constituency, that I do my level best. They also, as I said, very importantly, supported the Sinn Féin project, which is about consolidating the process, getting the agreement implemented, and working for everybody in the way in which we all have to do.
All right, do you think that the IRA will respond to this strong Sinn Féin performance with what Seamus Mallow might call an act of generosity?
Well, I already listened, Noel, to your, what I would call at this point in time, a tiresome interview with Barbara de Bruyne a few minutes ago, and I'm not going to go down that road for you. As far as I'm concerned, Republicans have clearly demonstrated, which was then respected by the electorate in this election across the board in the 6 counties. Republicans demonstrated their commitment to the process, their tenacity against all of the difficulties placed in front of us, and our commitment to ensuring that the peace process goes forward and all of the rights and entitlements of every citizen will be delivered and protected. And that's my response.
I'm sorry you feel interviews which mention the IRA are tiresome, but surely you should recognise it is the central issue for a huge number of unionists in this community, the unionists that you are claiming to be trying to reach out to. So if you are tired of listening to interviews about the IRA, maybe you shouldn't be.
Well, Noel, I didn't say for one moment that any interview which mentioned the IRA as tiresome. I'm saying that your line a few minutes ago, in my opinion, which I am entitled to, which I'm sure you'll agree,
of course,
is tiresome. And the response that I got on the doorsteps were people who were saying, we know you are working very hard, we know you are trying your best, we know that you'll continue to do that. You convince us that you're doing the best to resolve all of the issues, including the difficulties around what some people have said out of the IRA, and we're prepared to deal with that, Noel. So I'm sorry if I offend you, but you're offending me.
No, you don't offend
people.
me. I'm past being offended, Mr. Maskey, long past being offended. But the question remains. I mean, do you expect, if the Sinn Féin project is succeeding as you claim it is, do you expect that the IRA will acknowledge that by saying, well, we've got to do our bit now at last?
Our first test, first of all, will be to engage with the governments, which we have already said we have arranged for Saturday. Our attempts will be to get all the parties together, all of those who want to see this process to work. We will continue in the project, which is about resolving our conflict well into the future, and we believe we'll do that.
Mr. Maskey, thank you very much indeed in South Belfast. Let's go to Donna for an APSAM.
Around 60% of the 108 Assembly seats have now been declared in the election, but none in North Down, where after 27 hours of voting, one is full. DUP continue to lead the race across constituencies. Sinn Féin's hopes of a third seat in West Tyrone have been dashed, with the SDLP now expected to keep one seat there. Now to the battle within unionism, and the success of the DUP has once more put the spotlight on David Trimble's leadership. Mr. Trimble says he has no intention of resigning, but Jeffrey Donaldson says David Trimble's position as Ulster Unionist leader is untenable. He says anyone who believes the Ulster Unionists can simply pick up from where they were before the election is deluding themselves.
I am eager to see the Ulster Unionist Party get out of the mess that it's in. I never thought I would see the day, Noel, that my party would end up third behind Sinn Féin, the Republican Party, in a major election in Northern Ireland.
In North Belfast, the PUP's Billy Hutchinson is officially about to be eliminated, and Seamus Close of the Alliance Party is through in Lagan Valley. The Taoiseach has been speaking about the election at the British-Irish Summit Council meeting in Wales. He said the people have spoken and that the DUP have a mandate, but with that comes responsibilities. Some other news, and an estimated 4,000 workers from Bombardier Shorts in Belfast have begun a third day of industrial action. Workers from Amicus and the Transport Union walked away from their posts on Wednesday. This morning, picket lines were in place again outside the company's Queen's Island complex. Strike action began following a dispute over shifts and redundancies. A man was kidnapped by 3 men in Londonderry last night while his wife was ordered to go to the furniture store where she works, empty the safe and take the money and give it to another one of the gang across the border in Muff. After the money was handed over, her husband was released. Both victims were shaken but uninjured. And finally, back to the counting, and a question for the anoraks amongst you. Which was the longest count in Northern Ireland's PR history? Well, the answer is South Antrim in the 1982 Assembly election. They counted for 12 hours on the first day, 21 on the second, and finished at 6 on the Saturday morning. Busy enough. Noel.
Anoraks, that's no way to talk about Sydney and Mark Devenport. How insulting. Let's come back to my guests here. Stephen Farry, David Ford, tight fight there. You always knew it was going to be a tight fight.
Absolutely.
But,
from day one, we knew that was going to be the most crucial battle for the Alliance Party, and it's very good to see we're still in there. The gap this morning was 500 votes between David and Martin Meehan. It's now narrowing to 360, so it's going to get even tighter as the day goes on.
Are you going to predict it?
At this stage, it's going to go right to the wire, and I would say probably less than 200 votes that David predicted.
Right, okay. Davey Adams, I know you have to leave us in a moment, but just before you go, Billy Hutchinson now eliminated. There's one Loyalist representative in the new Assembly. Bad news?
I think so, and certainly on a personal level, I'm very disappointed for Billy. But I think it is bad news. Billy, very hard-working representative, but as well as that, I think it helped to anchor at least that section of loyalism. And as I said earlier, I wouldn't overstress that, but you know, it does play a part in it, and it's sad to see Billy going, I think.
Do you think any part, I mean, your own party, the UDP, hasn't made a comeback or even begun a comeback or perhaps even thought about a comeback? Do you think parties can come back, small parties can come back from these setbacks?
I think it's very difficult. I think it depends how small you are. I think the Alliance have shown an ability to recover, but Alliance haven't really fallen into the very small party mould. I think, and as I said this earlier, I think it's almost the way the whole thing is developing here in Northern Ireland. I almost think it's a case of independence and small parties need not apply, and I think that's the way it's going. Until we sort out all of the arguments within unionism and within broad Republican nationalism, I think that's going to remain the case.
But they are being swallowed up, I mean, those arguments are being swallowed up by the DUP at the moment, the smaller unionist party.
The DUP have done very, very well, and they have gobbled up and hoovered up those dissident type unionists, and that's no surprise. But you know, credit has to be given where credit's due. They also have increased their vote. They have done it with and this is another point I think that Ulster Unionist Party has to look at as well as the SDLP, and that is that you don't merely win a seat, walk away and come back in a few years' time, 6 weeks before another election, and expect to be elected again. I think the electorate quite rightly now expect that you work throughout your term, almost canvass as it were throughout your term. Right. I think Sinn Féin and the DUP do that. They also manage their vote. I mean, compare Iris Robinson in Strangford, how she went in, only canvassed one part of her area, sitting MP, and managed without any difficulty at all to get herself and her two running mates in. And as I say, in Legan Valley, you have three anti-agreement unionists running. Only two of those managed to get in,
you
and
made
a
that
pro-agreement
point.
get in, yeah.
Davey Adams, thank you very much indeed. Let's go to Balmoral, Belfast, and Jim Fitzpatrick.
Noel, thank you. Just in North Belfast, for starters, I think we're in the very last stage here. Pat Convery of the SDLP has been eliminated. His votes will certainly bring in Alban McGuinness, and then what you'll probably find is that Cathy Stanton of Sinn Féin will be elected above Billy Hutchinson, and that will finally will be all the candidates in North Belfast. In South Belfast, Esmond Burney and of the UUP and Mark Robinson of the DUP have both reached the quota on the transfers of the DUP candidate Ruth Patterson, and that means that at the bottom end of South Belfast then it's still a three-way fight between the two SDLP seats. Alex Maskey is almost certainly in there, and Monica Williams of the Women's Coalition, although all the money at this stage is on it being two SDLP and Sinn Féin.
Okay, thank you very much indeed for that, Jim. Let's go straight to South Down and Eddie McGrady of the SDLP, who of course didn't stand this time for election. Mr. McGrady, an extraordinary turnover. You had 10, 11,000 first preference votes last time, but this time Jim Wells topped the poll. What do you think accounts for that?
Well, you cannot top the poll in a PR election.
Well, you know what I mean.
Parties top the polls, not individuals.
Yeah.
The SDLP topped the poll in South Down. But nonetheless, I am disappointed that some of our supporters, and they are supporters, did not bother to turn out. They felt comfortable about the result, they felt comfortable about the surface, and I think they're now going to regret that if, and I hope we don't, if we have the possibility of losing the seat. The remarkable thing to me is that Sinn Féin are doing so well right throughout. I call them the Teflon party because nothing sticks to them. They helped to bring down the institutions. Their recent history has been ignored completely. Their current intimidation of our community is ignored, and yet Teflon-like, nothing bad sticks to them. Now, the community will at some time realise that together the community has elected two extremes. and have got to be brought together
All right,
again.
but
How that's going to happen, I don't know.
You call them the Teflon Party. They say they're dynamic, they are positive, they have led this peace process, and nationalist people are recognising that in their droves.
They could have delivered, the institutions could have been sustained to this very day had they carried out their undertakings, which they gave, albeit reluctantly, on the Good Friday when they signed up. That is to take the armies, the organisation and the bombs and the guns out of Northern Irish politics, as the people of Ireland, North and South, had asked them to do. In spite of that, they continue to get support, which is an indirect, in my opinion, and make no apology for it, an indirect support for violence and current intimidation in the communities that I represent.
All right. Now, do you have any regrets about not standing again?
Not personally, no, because I had the dual mandate of both the Assembly and Westminster, and that was demanded by the political circumstances of the time 4 years ago. But there's a new generations moving on, and I will continue to have a very heavy workload in Westminster and for the South Down constituency. So it was appropriate and proper to move aside and let another candidate take my place, if you like.
All right, that's on a personal level. On a party level, I mean, we've seen people like Dennis Hockey, Joe Byrne hit the dirt here. I mean, they could have done with you.
Well, I mean, take Joe Byrne, for instance, which illustrates the point I'm making. It was the Barbara de Bruyn, the Minister of Health, who literally closed the Omagh Hospital, and they face-saved it by blaming Des Brown. Nothing stuck there. It's not Sinn Féin that suffered for the closure of that hospital, it was SDLP who supported the retention of the hospital. That's a typical practical example of what I mean by the Teflon effect.
So they're just better at politics than you are then?
The North.
They're just better at politics than you are then?
Well, they've damn sight more money than we have, I can tell you. Their PR is extensively paid for and well-heeled, and we cannot compete organisationally, well, because we simply do not have the easy money that is obviously in their coffers. They're reputed to be the wealthiest party in Western Europe. I think that is there for the observation.
They say it's not money, it's passion. Maybe there's passion lacking in the SDLP now.
Well, I don't know. I've been passionate for a very long time, so I don't know what it is not to be passionate. But I think we in the SDLP have delivered all that is good in Northern Ireland politics. We'll now see whether, and the communities have made their decision, I'm not balking at that, see whether the new leaders, if you like, and I concede that, DUP and SF, have that interest of the community rather than their party at heart. Because we did sacrifice our party for the sake of peace, and we were not rewarded for it in any way.
Eddie McGrady, thank you very much indeed. Let's catch up on the figures with Mark.
Thanks, Noel. Lots of results coming in. In fact, we're going to give you a detailed breakdown of the figures in South Down. Eddie McGrady, of course, had a big pulling power for the SDLP in that constituency in the past. He is the MP for the area, but he didn't stand this time, and there were SDLP casualties. Mark, Devenport, let's just look at the numbers here at the top of the table.
Jim Wells, as we were saying earlier on, delighted with his 40% increase in the share of his vote. Dermot Nesbitt surviving an internal battle with Jeffrey Donaldson, but the main battle within this constituency is the nationalist one and the Sinn Féin challenge in the absence of Eddie McGrady in the race.
OK, we'll just look at the bottom of the table here.
We see there McConvey, the Sinn Féin candidate, and Marion Fitzpatrick, the SDLP candidate, and a few others. Then their surpluses, or not surpluses, when they're eliminated, it will come into play.
OK, so back to the top now, and you can see Jim Wells being elected at that point. He reached the quota comfortably. He exceeded the quota in terms of first preferences, so he was elected. Let's just move through these figures here. You can see his surplus redistributed.
Yeah, what we're expecting here is that Dermot Nesbitt, the former minister, will come in for the Ulster Unionists. That's fairly clear. PJ Bradley for the SDLP, Katrina Ruan, the main candidate. Of course, she was brought into the constituency from outside, all her associations with the Columbia case and so on helping her. Margaret Ritchie looks as if she's home and dry. She was Eddie McGrady's assistant, and she's the second candidate there. The question is, can Willie Clark of Sinn Féin come through? and make a gain for Sinn Féin. They've gained in terms of the share of their vote, but will he take Eamon O'Neill's seat? Eamon O'Neill, they're the outgoing MLA, but there's still some SDLP votes from the other candidate, Marion Fitzpatrick, that could go to Eamon O'Neill to shore him up, but also more Sinn Féin votes to spare there as well.
I'm just hearing, in fact, that these figures are changing all the time. It's very difficult for us to keep up to speed with it. There's been another stage, I think, since we came to this, and in fact, a redistribution of some of those who've been eliminated, and PJ Bradley is in fact through. So we'll catch up with that in just a moment or two. I mean, what people saw there, just to stick with the whole PR and how it works, we saw the redistribution there. You saw the word surplus come on. Jim Wells' surplus was redistributed, and what's happening now is that the bottom candidates are being eliminated one by one, and their votes are being redistributed, so these figures are shuffling. We can demonstrate that in a moment or two, in fact, with North Down very effectively indeed. There's an awful lot of shuffling going on there. Here's Fermanagh. This is just a summary. Sydney, just talk us through this one quickly. We now have 5 of the 6 elected in Fermanagh, South Tyrone.
Yes, and Tom Elliott for the Ulster Unionist, and then Arlene Foster, and for Sinn Féin, Michelle Gildersleeve, Tommy Gallagher, Maurice Morrow elected for the Democratic Unionists. And
the 6th seat?
Probably Jerry McHugh, or possibly
I think
the other Sinn Féin.
He was running behind. He was running behind by his.
Yes,
I think so. We'll see a change of personality there on the Sinn Féin side.
Okay, here's Lagan Valley, Mark. No surprise, as we saw, of course, Jeffrey Donaldson topped the poll. But there's Billy Bell home. We looked at this earlier, and we knew that Edwin Poots was through. Billy Bell will be pleased. And he's on the other wing of the party from Jeffrey.
He's pro-agreement wing, and he obviously was fearing that his vote would be damaged by Ivan Davis's solo run. Now, Ivan Davis didn't do as well as he'd hoped, and so Billy Bell has survived, but there's still a lot to play for here. We think Patricia Loosley will probably keep her seat with Paul Butler being eliminated, but the question is, and we also think Seamus Close of Alliance should be all right, although his vote is down on the pass. But the 6th seat here, will it go to Andrew Hunter, the DUP MP for Basingstoke, who they believe could attract a lot of Donaldson transfers, or will it go to Jeffrey Donaldson's running mate Nora Beer?
Okay, that's interesting. He's an independent Conservative, I think, at Westminster, isn't that right?
Independent Conservative, but also kind of huddled together with the DUP on their bench there.
Little bit of a change in East London Derry. The addition of George Robinson, former mayor of Limavady, running mate to Gregory Campbell, and he's home and dry.
Yeah, he's home and dry. Gregory Campbell will be pleased. He managed his vote. I mean, they would have ideally liked 3, but I think he'll be relatively pleased with 2. It's looking like Norman Hillis might possibly come in as another Ulster Unionist. Now he's on the sceptical wing of the party, so that'll be a degree of cold comfort to David Trimble.
And John Dallett for number 6?
Yeah, John Dallett should come in, but the SDLP obviously very disappointed that they've lost Michael Coyle's seat, which was held by the late Arthur Doherty, and that's at the expense of Francie Brolly.
And a very big personal vote for Arthur Doherty. We know that he stood down for ill health, and Michael Coyle took over, but obviously didn't make the impact
that was necessary
to ensure him the seat this time
Francie Brolly was a strong candidate for Sinn Féin, a lot of connections outside of the party in the musical world, in the sporting world.
And his wife, of course, Anne Brolly, is the current mayor of Limavady. North Belfast.
Fred Cobain will be breathing a sigh of relief. At one stage early on in the count, we wondered whether he'd be fighting it out for the last seat, but Billy Hutchinson is the one who's losing out here.
Yeah, let's look at this one. This is the really intriguing one, where Sydney might get excited about this one. This is a bit of a one-off. We are now how many hours into it? 27 hours, something like that, into the count. Obviously, they didn't count overnight, but here we are, more than a day later, and we have not had anybody elected in North Down.
Well, I knew that trying to explain the intricacies of PR was going to rebound upon me with a question like this. In effect, that's what we're having in North Down. No one elected for a lengthy period of time, and then just the elimination of candidates, the small parcels of votes, so it's a long and a slow process.
So the quota is 4,406, and there's the table. None of them have reached it, and there are a bunch of 6 who are close to it. So let's just move through this quickly. We look at the bottom of the pile here.
So in a sense, you have the 316, 428, they've gone, Robertson's gone.
Right down to the very bottom here, they've all gone.
Right down to the very bottom. They've now all gone.
So their votes are now being redistributed, and I think we can see the votes shuffling. There's just a constant shuffle here. So explain this to us, Sydney.
Well, in effect, when many of the lower candidates say their votes will be transferred at value 1, and they'll go on to the next person preferred by the people who voted for those candidates. And eventually you'll get to a situation where there may be 7 candidates left, and the 7th will be eliminated, and we'll have the 6 remaining there. But it might take still some time to execute.
Eileen Bell was suggesting she might in fact be the first through. Now just looking at those figures, it doesn't look as if she's going to be first in.
Still some distance
She's
to go.
well down, but then you've got to look at who are the people who are being eliminated. At this point we should really be going over to Stephen Farry, who is one of the people who's going to be eliminated in the studio and knows more about North Down than most other people on this planet. But for instance, we have, and I will stand corrected by him, Brian Wilson. Now a lot of those votes will go to the Alliance. We have Jane Morris of the Women's Coalition, the SDLP vote of Liam Logan. And
is Jane Morris out at this stage?
No,
she was hanging in by the skin of her teeth this morning.
But looking at 1,478 votes that she's hanging on to, I just think she's not going to cling onto that precipice. She's going to be coming down off it.
It's interesting, isn't it? I spoke to someone close to the Women's Coalition this morning, and they were saying that they were very, very hopeful that Monica McWilliams and Jane Morris's votes, first preference votes, were going to be up. They were getting a very good canvass. They were hearing from people that they were going to put them down as first preference, and both of their first preference votes were down.
Indeed, yeah. I mean, Monica McWilliams suffered at the hands of Alex Maskey. She was obviously dependent on a lot of natural Sinn Féin votes there. Jane Morris, well, it's just a more competitive environment. I mean, Diana Peacock, to some extent, as a woman candidate on the pro-agreement wing of Ulster Unionism, will have eaten into some of her natural vote there. The SDLP have put on a vigorous campaign in North Down, so there's a squeeze on that kind of women's coalition vote in this constituency.
Okay, picture is constantly changing. I'm just hearing as we leave this section that Alban McGuinness has been returned for the SDLP in North Belfast, and Seamus Close is in for the Alliance Party in Lagan Valley. So there you have it. More results soon, I have no doubt. Meantime, back to you, Noel.
Thank you, Mark. And as if by magic, Seamus Close appears on our screen from Lagan Valley. Congratulations to you, Mr. Close.
Thank you, Noel.
You hear me okay? A good result for you, of course, but elsewhere it's not been great for the Alliance Party, has it?
Well, at the moment it's very dodgy, but let's wait till all the votes are cast. It was always known that we would be waiting on the latter counts. As they say, it's not over until the fat lady sings, and she certainly hasn't sung, or if she has, I haven't heard her.
All right. What are your fears, if any, about the squeezing of the smaller parties? 18 in 1998, perhaps you could be the only ones with you and David Irvine at the end of this election.
Yeah, I think that's a very, very sad situation in Northern Ireland, because the smaller parties have got a lot to offer. They punch far beyond their weight. And I think that the difficulty this particular time is that there's been an overemphasis on what I would refer to as a tribalism within Northern Ireland. And I don't say that in a derogatory sense. I can understand it and I can appreciate it. I can appreciate how the people vote, and I will never ever blame the electorate. But I do believe that more cognizance ought to be given to the message, particularly by the media, if I dare say so, to the message of the smaller parties, those that are trying to represent across the board. We should not be written off, as it appears, before the elections. We should be given a fair wind. And I would also have to say that within Northern Ireland, I think it is absolutely ridiculous and unfair to our electorate to have an election at the end of November. And I bet you your bottom dollar that the Prime Minister will not hold a general election in the rest of the United Kingdom at the end of November.
But it makes it the same for everyone. Whatever time of year it happens at, it must have the same effect on every party. I mean, the weather's the weather.
Oh, absolutely. But when you add to that the type of message that has gone about 4 main parties, about the differences between the tribes, about every programme pulling in the big voices representing the tribes to the total, virtually total exclusion of the type of moderate voice, then add that to the weather. Add on to that the various hoops that the electorate had to be put through. And I think particularly of the elderly. I mean, it was so unfair to give them registration forms, for example, in September, and then tell them, sorry, we're not using those ones, we're using the ones from last September. Yeah. I mean, you couldn't have contrived a more difficult situation. And then for poll cards not to be delivered, for the whole message to be confused. You're
not blaming the electorate, but you're blaming the weather and you're blaming the Electoral Commission and everyone else. Do you not think seriously, if this election had taken place on a blazing day in July, the Alliance Party would still be fighting for its life?
if this election had taken place in May, when the election was supposed to take place, I am absolutely convinced. But of course, I mean, this is all hypothetical, because I could argue till the cows come home and you could try to argue against me, flippantly or otherwise, that we would have got less seats. But I would argue strongly that we would have got more, because we were coming out on the back of the hard work that the smaller parties had contributed within the Northern Ireland Assembly, where we were demonstrating and clearly trying to make the Assembly work. A year has gone past since that happened, and that has been to the disadvantage, obviously, of the smaller parties who have been ignored by the media.
All right, can I ask you, I know you won't speculate about this, but I'll try and coax you to anyway. If David Ford should not win his seat, what are the implications for the leadership of your party, and would you be interested in assuming that mantle? Theoretically.
Well, as I say, you love to get into these somewhat perverse theories, and I'm not going to rise to that particular bait. I mean, let's see what happens. We're still in early days, and it was known in advance of the votes being cast that David was going to be hanging on probably into one of the last counts. There's nothing new about that, there's nothing strange about that. It's what we anticipated, it's what we expected, and it's what's happening.
But I always expect that political parties themselves speculate about what will happen if. I'm simply asking you to share some of that speculation with us.
Okay, you wouldn't want me to do that now at this particular time.
I'll go on.
Oh, no.
You will.
I won't.
We'll leave it there. Seamus Close, thank you very much indeed. Let's return to my studio guests. I've got to Stephen King, the ultra Trimblista, Ulster Unionist, and Sinclair McAllister has joined us again, the former DUP Director of Communications. Stephen King, David Trimble putting a very brave face on it. He says, I'm a sticker. We're not conceding anything at the moment, but whatever way this shakes down, it's been a humiliation, has it not?
I don't call it a humiliation at all, Noel. I mean, we went out of the last assembly with 30 anti-agreement unionists and 28 in the pro-agreement camp. It looks today as if 28 are going to be elected on a pro-agreement manifesto and 30 elected on anti-agreement manifesto. No change.
Yeah, but a few of them being Alliance party votes.
No, I'm not counting the Alliance there. I'm counting 27 Ulster Unionists and David Irvine, that's 28.
All right, but I mean, half a dozen of those are anti-agreement.
Well, a number
possibly as many as
they were all elected on the same manifesto. It's a positive unionist manifesto. I mean, Jeffrey Donaldson and I drew up the Charter of Ulster Unionist Principles between us.
Yeah.
So it's as much.
Well, did you draw up the mini manifesto, which was added to the manifesto?
I saw a one-sheet fax that went round a few newsrooms. It didn't seem to get very much attention. If that's a mini manifesto, I'd call that a micro manifesto.
You're obviously yourself following your party leader's example and putting a brave face on it, but we've already had Arlene Foster and we already had Jeffrey Donaldson today calling for David Trimble, or saying at least that his position would be untenable.
Look, there's a meeting of the Ulster Unionist Assembly Party at 10:30 on Monday morning. We'll see how many people there are around the table. I suspect it's going to be 27 or 28. 3, 4 of them perhaps will hold to that view. 25 of them will hold to a different point of view.
Right, so I don't know, how many seats are you saying that the DUP will have?
I think they look as though they're going to have 29 or 30.
29 or 30, plus those 3 or 4, so that's going to be 34 seats. That's going to be a majority of unionists in the Assembly opposed to the agreement. They want it renegotiated.
The majority of unionists in the last Assembly held to that position.
There is a much clearer mandate now, though, for renegotiation of the agreement.
Well, I think what we've seen, that I don't deny the DUP have had a very good election. They have done that by adjusting their message, by basically accepting the framework of the agreement that David Trimble and the Ulster Unionist leadership negotiated. They're actually working now within a Trimbleite framework of politics. They say that they are not talking about anything other than a 3-stranded process, power sharing in Northern Ireland with links for mutual advantage with the Republic of Ireland. That's what I call, a progressive unionist framework. They want changes here and there, but with the exception of Paisley and a few of his people, they're not really talking about scrapping it. They're not suggesting that it can actually achieve majority rule stormont, which was their policy for many a year.
All right. So
they have actually had to accommodate a reality that we created with the SDLP.
Okay, so if you have 27, 28 on Monday at this meeting, is there any chance that David Trimble would simply say, look, I have tried my best, I have failed, the landscape has changed, we're no longer speaking for the majority of unionists, I have done enough, it's time I went?
Does that sound like David Trimble to you?
No, but I'm asking you It's a possibility.
No.
No. Okay.
The leadership of the party will be decided yet again in March of next year.
Okay, thank you for the moment. Don't go away. Let's go to North Down, and Jane Morris is waiting there of the Women's Coalition. Jane, again, you haven't given up the ghost yet, but how's it looking?
Absolutely not. I asked for a recount because in this 10th round, there are 11 votes in it, so it's very, very close to call. So we have asked for a recount at this stage.
Okay, and how long will that take?
Well, it can take 30, 40 minutes for a count of a stage, and that's the way it's been. Even longer, actually. The count has been quite long here in North Down. So it could be that long. We're just checking up to see how long it'll take. It's important because it's a very, very narrow margin, and it's important we get it right, and we could still be in.
Okay, Jane, thank you very much indeed. Let's go to Donna for a quick upsum. No, we don't have Donna. Let's quickly... We do have Donna.
I'm here behind you, Noel. Thank you. Now to some of your messages. Stuart Harris from Rathfern says David Trimble must now resign. The DUP are the voice of the Unionist people. Una from Derry says it's great that Sinn Féin are increasing their votes on such a large scale. I just hope the Unionists will now respect their democratic rights as Republicans. Tony from Lisburn says the Ulster Unionist Party have only themselves to blame for the swing of votes to the DUP. Paul in North Antrim says, we had no one call at our door looking for our vote. It seems this has been a lacklustre campaign by the Unionists in safe seats. Ian from Dublin says Sinn Féin have caused the agreement to collapse by not getting the IRA to disarm and therefore destroying the Ulster Unionist vote. Ronnie from Newtonabbey says, I'm delighted at the results so far, but I'm sad that Seamus Mallon is not standing as I admire him as a great statesman. If you haven't sent in your message, please do so. Let us know what you think of the results as they come in. You can text us on your mobile on 07786 202 200. Your normal text charge will apply, and please give us your name and tell us where you are from, or send us an email to politicsni@bbc.co.uk. Noel.
Donna, thank you. I'm having one or two little problems with my earpiece. You might see me fiddling with it a little bit, but we'll carry on regardless. Let's go to Balmoral. Alban McGuinness is there. He's just been elected for the SDLP. Congratulations to you, Mr. McGuinness.
Thank you very much, Noel.
It's been a tough time for the SDLP.
A very tough time indeed. In North Belfast, the real problem we had was voters not coming out to support the party. We estimated our vote at 8,000. Our actual vote was around about 5,000. There was no slippage to Sinn Féin. In actual fact, their vote was down by 2,000 from the 2001 general election. So there's no evidence of any slippage or transfer to Sinn Féin. The reality was that our voters did not come out. Now, that was bad. And despite a very vigorous campaign by the SDLP in North Belfast. However, of course I'm pleased to be elected.
That's a key point though, isn't it? You had a vigorous campaign and your voters didn't come out. Does that mean they're just not listening to you?
I'm not sure what the reason is, but I'm telling you what the facts are in relation to North Belfast. There is no doubt that people staying at home caused us around about 3,000 votes, and we will have to examine that and we'll have to see why that happened, but that is the reality of the situation.
Yeah. What will be the process of finding out why that happened? Will you go back and ask them why they didn't come out?
I think we'll have to do that. We'll also have to examine our registers just to see the areas that were worst affected in terms of voter abstention. But I think there was a feeling abroad as well that this election was to an assembly that possibly would not work. I think there was a feeling of frustration amongst the electors, and I think that as a result of that, people decided simply to remain at home.
Okay, so it looks like this assembly is not going to be up and working. How do you feel about that? You've been elected to an assembly which is not going to exist.
Very, very sad indeed. I think that there was a golden opportunity for the people of Northern Ireland to elect an assembly that could be vibrant, that could unite our communities instead of divide our communities. But the votes for both Sinn Féin and the DUP confirm a very intense polarisation of political opinion here in Northern Ireland. And I think it will take a long time for that division to cease.
So if Sinn Féin can say that their project, as they call it, is succeeding, the SDLP's is clearly failing?
No, I think the SDLP will regroup. I think that we are a resilient party, and I've no doubt that we can regain our strength. But what I say to you is this, that I believe that as a result of this election, the agreement has been very badly damaged. And the opportunity for the people of Northern Ireland to live together and to progress together and to end sectarianism and to build a community that is reconciled and comfortable with itself, I think that that has been lost as a result of this election.
Alban McGuinness, for the moment, thank you very much indeed. Let's go to East Antrim and Sammy Wilson of the DUP, who has now been elected. Sammy Wilson, congratulations to you. And we understand there could be 3 DUP seats in this constituency.
I think that it's almost totally certain now that we're going to have the 3 seats in East Antrim. Our first preference votes, of course, were higher than the Ulster Unionist Party. We have overtaken them, and also we did that against the background of having 2 people who had left the party and stood as independents, and if you take their votes into consideration, we actually had a performance which put us about 4,000 votes beyond the Ulster Unionists, and that's now going to translate into 3 DUP seats, whereas before at the last election we only had 1.
So you abandoned East Belfast then for the greener climes of, or perhaps the more orange climes of East Antrim?
Well, I suppose it always was a bit of a wrench leaving East Belfast, which I've represented now for 23 years. But the Westminster election really was the watershed, and when we came within 120 votes of winning that election, that kind of sealed my destiny, and I moved to the North Antrim coast. And so here I am, and now elected as the MLA. I will have 2 colleagues. The 120 votes that we were short at the Westminster election, we now have about 4,000 ahead of the Ulster Unionists. So I suppose the next election we're looking forward to is when we take the Westminster seat here as well.
Sammy Wilson MP.
It could be Sammy Wilson MP joining a growing rank of Democratic Unionist MPs, and of course being one of the DUP team, which will be the biggest Unionist team in the Assembly.
All right, we're hearing calls for acts of generosity from the victorious parties in this election. As you go in to whatever is coming next, a review, a renegotiation, a cosy chat, as you call it to me in Hearts and Minds one night, are you prepared to be generous?
Well, we have said that we are aiming to have a workable administration in Northern Ireland which is fair to all. Now, we can't be any more generous than that. What we want to see an end to is the churlishness of the pro-agreement parties who for a long time now have been prepared to ignore the fact that the vast majority of Unionists have turned their back on the agreement, which was really a series of one-way concessions. So I hope that we'll see some generosity from those who have now been forced to recognise that the Unionist community has been the community which has been hurt over the last 5 years and must now have the situation redressed.
Sammy Wilson, thank you very much indeed. Let's see how the figures are shaking down. Mark.
OK, Noel, thank you. Let's just whiz into our virtual chamber and update you on the state of the parties. There we are inside the chamber. Over to the right-hand side, first of all, in the Unionist benches. 67 seats declared of the 108 at this stage at lunchtime on Friday. The DUP have 25 at this point, well up on last time. The Ulster Unionists have 18. Progressive Unionist Party just holding on to 1. Billy Hutchinson is out in North Belfast. That's David Irvine in East Belfast. Sinn Féin with 15. The SDLP have 5 at this point. And they're in the middle. 2 now for the Alliance Party and 1 independent, Dr. Kieran Deeney in West Tyrone, who campaigned on an independent ticket to better hospital services in and around Omagh. Mark Devenport, the Unionist bench is filling up a little bit quicker than the Nationalist benches, and the DUP would be very happy with the way things are shaking down at this point. Now, how much above that 25 do you think is realistic for them?
Well, I think we're looking at 30, maybe 31 at a max, but certainly they're going to be ahead of the Ulster Unionists, because even if the Ulster Unionists hold their own, they're only going to still be on about 27, 28 or something like that. So, you know, clearly the DUP will be the majority party, both in terms of first preference votes and in terms of seats.
Well, let's look at those first preference votes. There you can see it. We've seen these figures for some time. The DUP on top there with 25.7. Sinn Féin next, the Ulster Unionists, SDLP at 17, and the other parties. This is the all-important picture, which just shows you the change on 1998, and really it shows you that it's not been great for the SDLP and Alliance, particularly at this point, and the other small parties not quite all disappeared, but certainly not there in the numbers that they were.
That's the hoovering up job that we talked about the DUP doing, particularly all those independent unionists just being hoovered.
Yeah. Okay, just a few results are in, and we might as well update them and let you see the faces of some of the new representatives. PJ Bradley's in South Down.
Indeed, I mean, he was always going to be a lead candidate there. Margaret Ritchie will probably come in, but the question is, will Sinn Féin have enough votes to make a gain?
Okay, bit of a change in South Belfast since we last looked at it. Michael McGimpsey was in on his own. His running mate is through, and Mark Robinson, who's the quiet man of the DUP, is there.
Yes, I mean, even though Ruth Patterson, his running mate, gets a little bit more of a high profile in the local media, Mark Robinson pulls in the votes on the grounds, and he's come in there. Michael McGimpsey, who topped the poll, bringing in Esmond Burney, John Hiddleston, their third candidate, not doing very well. Alex Maskey, and this is the thing about PR elections, he came in with a big pile of votes, 3,933 votes first off. He hasn't got very far to go to the quota, but on the transfer system, he's slowing down at the moment. Well, he's not picking up, he is beginning to pick them up, but it's a slow business. I think he's pretty much guaranteed to getting there, but it's going to take, we're already on something like stage 11 of the count there.
And Monica may well lose out.
It looks like she'll lose out. It looks like Carmel Hannah's a cert for the SDLP, and that Alistair MacDonald may pip Monica to the post for the last seat.
Now here's a fascinating one, Sydney. This is Upper Ban, and I don't know if we can really give a reason for this, but I think that we've got three in at this stage, and it could very well be that David Trimble is the only individual returned for Upper Ban who was an MLA before.
Yes, all change really in terms of the constituency there. David Simpson for the Democratic Unionist Party and Stephen Moutray following him in. Expecting that another Ulster Unionist will also be elected and probably...
There are casualties, Mark, aren't there? There are casualties. Dennis Watson, Darrow Hagan, George Savage.
The DUP here have hoovered up the seat that Dennis Watson took. He actually joined their ranks and was standing as a candidate, but his running mate Stephen Moutray, a businessman based in Lurgan, has proved more popular. David Simpson we were always expecting as their Westminster candidate, but we've seen Breege Rogers retire. She's going to be replaced by Dolores Kelly, so there's a change of personality there. We've also seen, somewhat surprisingly, a change of personality in the Sinn Féin candidate, because Darrow Hagan, who had a reasonable profile for them during the Drumcree dispute and so on, has been replaced by a running mate, John O'Dowd, who's the leader of the Sinn Féin group on the local council.
Okay, that's it as far as the numbers are concerned for the moment. Back to Noel.
Thank you very much indeed, and my guests are still with me here. We're looking, Sinclair McAllister, again, that you've got Stephen King beside you here. Perhaps you two could persuade each other who's going to be... whose way is going to be carried out over the next 12 months.
Earlier to hear Stephen in denial mode. I mean, that's the best impression of a political ostrich I've seen in a long time, and that won't cut it anymore. David Trimble and the Trimbleites have got to come to the realisation that there is a dynamic move within unionism, and it's away from this agreement. And the sooner they catch up with us, the better. Whether Trimble goes or not, that's for decision. I'd love to be a fly on the wall at this meeting on Monday. I think there's going to be more than just Jeffrey and a few who are anti-agreement, because you've got people now who are hanging on by their fingernails, and over the weekend they're going to sit and reflect and think about this, and they're going to jump ship. So I'd be amazed if there's not more anti-agreements unionists in that camp over the weekend.
All right, Stephen King.
Well, I think that as unionists, Sinclair and I will both probably agree that unionism does need to reflect generally. There is a huge division, a schism within the unionist electorate. Obviously,
also Unionist Party.
No. There's a division within the community, within the unionist community, Sinclair, which we have to face up to. Okay, Sinclair has the edge today, but Trimbleite unionism, pro-agreement unionism isn't going away either. And we have to be accommodated in the new reality too. I mean, I look at some of the results which Mark is going through there. I mean, with the exception of big names like Donaldson, like Burnside, like Foster, the people who've been sceptical or anti-agreement running on the Unionist Party ticket have done very badly. People were telling us that it was going to be touch and go between Jim Donaldson, Geoffrey's father, and Dermot Nesbitt in South Down. Not only did the UUP beat the DUP in South Down, but Dermot has had a fantastic result. You look in South Belfast, Michael Magimsey topping the poll, bringing in Esmond Burney, the anti-agreement Ulster Unionist candidate, less than 800 votes.
Overall, that doesn't cut it.
No, but I'm interested, you say that there needs to be a re-estimation, a rethinking, however we call this, and that you agree with Sinclair on that point. But yet, at another level, I mean, you don't agree on anything. I mean, David Trimble wants to press ahead with the Good Friday Agreement. They want to get rid of it altogether. Where are the points of agreement to discuss this new future?
Well, actually, I think in terms of what we're looking for, perhaps there isn't as much difference as some people suggest. What there is a huge tactical difference about whether or not the DUP can bring in what they claim is going to be a fair deal. I'm not sure they can. I don't believe that nationalism is going to move at the behest of the DUP. I don't think that the DUP have satisfactorily explained to the electorate what this deal is all about, how they're going to bring about a renegotiation, what they're going to give in return for all that they want out of a renegotiation.
You see, there's been much talk about your 7 tests, Sinclair McAllister, but looking at the 7 tests, I don't want to read them all out. But
you could drive a cart and horses through those 7 tests.
Well, absolutely, but equally you could endorse each one of them, couldn't you? I mean, they talk about the outcome must provide a settlement within the UK, not a process to united Ireland.
What's wrong with
Agreed
that?
arrangements must be capable of delivering an efficient and effective administration.
What's wrong with
a
that?
new settlement must be able to deliver equality of opportunity for unionists as well as nationalists. You would agree with all of that?
Yep.
Okay.
I agree with 6 of the 7 tests.
Well, it's funny, if he agrees with all that, David Trimble didn't go down that road and what he delivered. He's delivered nothing for the unionist community. That's the reason we're here today. Let's deal with the realities. This man has given away things. He hasn't gained anything for unionists. He's given stuff away. And that's obvious. That's the reason why the DUP are in pole position.
But he's given away things that 71% of the electorate agreed should be given away in the referendum in 1998.
No, we didn't give away. We gained on Good Friday, thank you.
Well, okay. But even by your definition of the thing, you'd be talking about policing, release of prisoners, things like those were things which people said, we'll swallow this.
Yes, look, Noel, it's quite obvious people have no faith in this man anymore. He's a bad negotiator in a bad agreement. And that fact is not going to go away.
It's better than no kind of negotiator, which is your leader.
No. The situation is this.
What has he ever negotiated? What has Paisley ever negotiated? What has Paisley ever brought
would I tell you
the unionist community?
Would I tell you something? As I said yesterday, the people have put their trust in Ian Paisley and the DUP, and it's a question of trust. And far better somebody
they have delivered a protest
far better
vote.
Somebody who would stop than somebody that will get into bed with Sinn Féin, which is what you've done
they
for the
have
past
delivered
years.
A protest
that's the
vote.
reason
they do
why
not
you're.
believe that
That's
Ian
the reason
Paisley
why you're in
is
denial, and that's the reason why you're in the back foot.
The reason they voted for Paisley is because they think
there's going to be
Paisley
a
won't
new
negotiate.
change and a new dynamic. And the time
there's no dynamic in the DUP.
You should get your head out of the sand,
I'll just move to the top of the table and let you two chat away there down the bottom for the moment. Barbara, when we hear that Jane Morris has been eliminated in North Down, it looks like there will be no women's coalition. Without wanting to pigeonhole you just as a woman, is that a bad thing for women in politics?
Well, I think we heard Seamus Close earlier on talking about the smaller parties, and I do think that smaller parties have made a contribution, and I think will be missed in the overall scheme of things. So I think the Women's Coalition wasn't just a women's party; it was also a smaller party with other.
Although it only had women in it, only women candidates, of course. But I mean, I know that Sinn Féin has prided itself on having a large number of women candidates and some new young female faces. But do you think that the days of a woman-only party were simply numbered? There was no point any longer to be made?
Well, no, I mean, I think, to be absolutely truthful, that what's happening here, and it does impinge a wee bit on the discussion down the end of the table, is that the DUP making gains isn't at the expense of the UUP, but at the expense of smaller parties. They're hoovering up smaller parties, and in some of the other battles they're getting squeezed again. But overall, we need to look at the fact that that rejectionists are in the minority here. the majority of people are still voting for pro-agreement. They're making a decision about where that will be most effective in this particular.
But it only works if it has support from both sides of the community. That is the basis of the whole idea.
But we are also very clearly in a situation where we are going to move forward, where the governments have made commitments. They've made commitments which was clear they may not be willing to implement during the election campaign in case it was seen that they were intervening in that. But they've told Davey Adams they're going to fulfil commitments which they now need to do on equality, on demilitarisation, on other whole range of aspects around justice, around the whole question of OTRs.
Okay. Let's go to South Belfast. Carmel Hanna awaits us from the SDLP. She has just been elected. Congratulations to you, Carmel Hanna. Can I just pick up on, are you hearing me okay?
Yes, I'm not sure that I've actually been elected yet.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry, that was the information given to me. Well, it looks like you may well be in the not too distant future. Would that be accurate?
I
okay.
hope so, yes.
Let me just continue this theme of women. It looks like Jane Morris has been eliminated in North Down. It looks like Monica McWilliams is not going to make it. So a great loss to women in politics, the demise of the Women's Coalition?
It's a great loss also to pluralism, that we've lost some of the smaller parties and that the middle ground is being squeezed. I mean, I found actually looking at the ballot papers yesterday quite depressing. We're more polarised than ever. We're moving away from what the Good Friday Agreement is about and what I'm about and what my party's about.
Altogether in this election, though, the SDLP has had a sad time. What do you think accounts for it?
I think maybe we have spent too much time actually solving the problem and we should have been organising on the ground because we're competing with a huge machine. And certainly we will learn from this and we will go forward. And indeed, our values are still there and I will certainly be out there being part of the SDLP. I'm very proud to be a Social Democrat and actually to be pushing my values, which are about an inclusive society, about pluralism, about social democracy.
Carmel Hanna, thank you very much indeed. Let's go to North Down, where I think we can hear more from... Okay, we're going to go... Oh, all right, we're getting a few shots there. We're going to go to South Down. I think Dermot Nesbitt is there for us. Dermot Nesbitt. Hello, Mr. Nesbitt.
Noel.
Good afternoon to you. What's the latest with you?
Well, I think I'm going to make it maybe on the next count or the count after. It's a little bit different from when I heard you at 12:30 yesterday saying about my demise.
Well, you weren't all that sure it wasn't going to be demise yourself at that stage, of course, let's be fair.
Well, at that time I was still at home. My agent told me not to come in too early and I was actually buttoning up my shirt. I nearly put the wrong button in the wrong hole when you said that.
He told you there was nothing to get very excited about. Don't rush in, you might have a long wait. Is that what he said to you?
Well, he said you needn't rush to the early afternoon.
All right. So anyway, you're pretty confident that 100 votes are going to come your way and you will be an MLA once again. What about the demise of Trimbleite unionism?
Well, let's be very clear about this, Noel. Trimbleite unionism represents a positive way forward for Northern Ireland. It represents bringing stability to Northern Ireland. It represents dealing with the dynamics of the problems that need to be addressed, namely, on the one hand, an inclusive form of government that all can have an affinity with, and on the other hand, dealing with paramilitarism so as it is gone. I listened to Sinclair McAllister there talking about us having to catch up. It is the DUP that is caught up. It is the DUP that is now negotiating in studios with Sinn Féin when they wouldn't do it. It's the DUP under Peter Robinson who said he would negotiate the same way as David Trimble did in 1998. Of course, the DUP ran away from the negotiations then. Yeah. It's the DUP who, when they were in the ascendancy and leading Ulster Unionism 25 years ago, promised devolution, promised a government, promised security, promised much and delivered nothing.
Okay, but you say that they're catching up. Actually, they've overtaken you. That's the problem, isn't it?
No, I'm talking about catching up on the attitude of how you resolve what is the problem in Northern Ireland, getting a stable form of government.
But more people think they've got it right than think your party's got it right.
Well, when you make people in Northern Ireland feel disillusioned about the process, which they did, when they point up that we are to blame for the demise of the police in Northern Ireland, RUC, which is totally untrue, when they say they do not participate in government, which they did, when you've Peter Robinson saying, I can act as a minister as I did without any recourse to Sinn Féin at all, he is wrong, because when he and his other ministers came before the Assembly dealing with the programme for government, that was a programme for government that was agreed by the executive, and the DUP participated fully.
But isn't
so
it
they
your
are
problem?
actually being fraudulent in what they're putting forward.
His voters are quite happy with that. You might be being fraudulent in your eyes. In the eyes of his voters and the increasing numbers of DUP voters, they say, well, that's fine. Do what you got to do, guys.
I recognise what the position is. I recognise what way the vote is going. But I still come back to the kernel of the issues that need to be resolved, namely how. I don't want to live in a Northern Ireland that cannot govern itself. I believe those who take the decisions that affect the people of Northern Ireland should be accountable to those people. Those dynamics will have to be solved. They were the same problems 2 weeks ago as they will be next week. It will be very interesting to see how the DUP will resolve that issue.
Derby Nisbet, thank you very much indeed. That is the problem, is it not, Seamus Mann? The problems have not changed.
Yeah, but we're not defining the problem. I mean, the reality is, in many ways, this election is the scarva of politics. It's a sham fight in many ways. Because, and I've been trying to do this for 2 days, when you look at what the DUP are saying, they still haven't told you, or me, or anybody else, what exact changes they want. Now, I have told them and laid out where they're not going to get changes, because it is not within their power to get them. What they're talking about is how you change, and this is a DUP proposition, how you change the arrangements for the institution known as the Northern Ireland Assembly and Executive, which will suit them. Now, you can't have an internationally binding agreement and then it be changed every time there's an election because it doesn't suit this party or that party.
We will have some time to discuss this. We must press on. We're really running out of time.
I'm sorry, I'm not getting the same time here as the debate between unionism. And you know, I'm old enough to insist upon it.
We're coming back, Mr.
Good man, Noel, thank you.
Acres of time, believe me.
And I hope you come back here.
Time. We will, of course, in about half an hour's time. Don't you worry.
Before that,
and you'll be back.
Noel.
Let me just go to Stephen Walker, who's in North Down, with Jane Morris, who has now been eliminated from the contest. Stephen.
Thanks, Noel. Well, the news here from North Down is that Jane Morris has failed to retain her seat. Commiserations.
Thank you, Stephen.
What did you put it down to? Why didn't you get it this time?
Well, I think possibly the most important was the very low turnout. I think that's here in North Down, 54%. That's something we've got to change. We've got to find a way to get our voters out. The moderates, the cross-community parties, the smaller parties, we need to get our voters out, and that was the big thing. Obviously, the second thing was the winter, the weather. People, spirits were low. And thirdly, polarisation. I mean, that's being recognised. I don't think it's the polarisation that people are claiming to the extent that people are claiming, but there is obviously a movement back into boxes.
So is this the end of the Women's Coalition?
Absolutely not. We're going to have to look at things. We're going to have to regroup, find out where we go from here, talk to a lot of people and see what happens next. But our campaign isn't over. I mean, there's probably going to be fewer women in the Assembly than there were last time, very possibly. And bread and butter issues, we need to fight for bread and butter issues, and those aren't the issues being fought on. We need to change that.
Okay, and if all the smaller parties are being squeezed, is it time you sat down and spoke to people like the Alliance and the Greens, people like that?
I think it's very important. We've never ruled anything out, and we shouldn't do it now.
Jane Morris, thank you very much. And with that, Noel, back to the studio.
Stephen and Jane, thank you very much indeed. Quick update from Donna.
The main news this lunchtime, over half of the 108 Assembly seats have been declared in the election, with the DUP still maintaining its lead on the second day of counting. Sinn Féin continue to make gains against the SDLP. After 28 hours of counting in North Down, there still hasn't been a single candidate elected. The election was the main topic of discussion between the Taoiseach and the Prime Minister at the British-Irish Council Summit meeting in Wales. Bertie Ahern said the DUP now have a mandate, but with that mandate comes responsibilities. Downing Street sources say there will be contact with the parties next week. In other news, a man was kidnapped in Londonderry last night while his wife was ordered to go to a store where she works. She was forced to empty a safe and take money to a location in County Donegal. Industrial action at Bombardier Shorts in Belfast is now in its third day. Around 4,000 members of the Amicus and Transport Workers Unions are taking part in the walkout. A 27-year-old mother from Strabane accused of arson with intent to endanger life has been released on bail by the High Court. It was alleged that Jennifer Moore of Churchview was drunk when she abandoned her 8-year-old son in a burning house last Tuesday. And the County Down home of a man with disabilities was burgled as he lay in his bed. 2 men ransacked the house in Upper Dromore Road in Warrenpoint yesterday and stole family jewellery. Their victim was treated for shock after his ordeal. Noel.
Thank you, Donna. Quickly back to Seamus Mallon. And I'm not conceding the principle that if you demand more time, you automatically get it. But are you saying that what needs to happen now is that we need to sit down and define, or each side needs to sit down and define for the other side precisely what it wants?
I'm saying exactly that because I'm not clear, and I've been very much involved in this election campaign. I don't know what the anti-agreement unionism wants. I do know what they can't get because it's outside of the preserve of the Northern Ireland institutions. I do know they'll not get changes, fundamental changes, which have already been made in policing and other areas, prisoners, where it seems to me they're talking about is how they change the institutional arrangements to suit them.
Okay.
Now, that is not possible, Noel. That's not going to be done. And if that's not going to be done, at least let's get a starting point by people telling them that's not going to happen.
I'm going to stop there. Just before we stop this section of the program, Stephen Farr, I just want to get a sense from you of what it's like to be an eliminated candidate.
Well, it's good to see that Eileen is almost set to be elected in North Down. I think what we have there is a very fractured centre ground with a lot of smaller parties. Obviously, Alliance is the best place to challenge the Unionists there. The vote is very slowly assembling for Eileen, and she'll be
Yeah, but how does it feel to be an eliminated candidate?
Well, I'm there to serve the greater party interest, and it's bigger than any single individual.
Wonderful answer. Thank you very much indeed. Okay, we're going to leave it there for about half an hour. We will be back on air here at 1:30 with lots more results for you. So please go and get yourself a quick sandwich and a cup of tea and get back here for 1:30. We'll see you then. Bye-bye.
Every home movie tells a home story.
Doors were opening, in all walks of life.
I don't think I'd ever been on an airplane before, so that in itself was an experience.
Still, I have to pinch myself that yes, I have seen Elvis Presley in the flesh.
Your stories through your eyes.
When you have a cine camera, it's to take whatever you can, when you can.
The girls followed the band, and the guys followed the girls.
He loved it.
Obviously, everybody went to an awful lot of trouble in those days to have their day out.
Super 8 Stories.
It was them who took them home, not us.
Sunday at 6:15 on BBC One.
And the new issue of Radio Times contains full details of forthcoming BBC programmes, together with complete listings for all major free-to-air and other television channels. Well, our election coverage continues in half an hour, but first on BBC One Northern Ireland, a roundup of today's lunchtime news from Darren Jordan. It's 1 o'clock.
The Soham jury hears secret tape recordings made while Ian Huntley and Maxine Carr were in prison. They hear Carr tell Huntley's mother that she discussed lying with him after the girls went missing. Terror alert, police raid a second home in Gloucester as a 24-year-old man is questioned. David Trimble says he's fighting on as Ian Paisley's Democratic Unionists look set to win more seats.